Welcome to the Falmouth Chamber of Commerce.
The Falmouth Chamber is dedicated to working on behalf of our members to make Falmouth a better place to live, work, and conduct business. We are committed to developing the economic, cultural, educational, and civic interests of our community and welcome the support from all organizations to achieve our combined goals. Whether you call Falmouth home, are a summer resident, or a visitor, we hope you take advantage of all that the Chamber has to offer.
People think that a locally owned and operated appliance store may not offer what they need. Actually, we have trained and dedicated sales associates, expert delivery and installation, professional repair service, and personal customer service. Plus, we have access to a huge local warehouse with over 6,000 models in stock. Crane Appliance. We call the Cape and Islands home. Carlson Printing for all your printing needs. 508-548-7303 or toll free at 1-800-696-7303. Our email address is carlsonprinting@aol.com. Carlson Printing for all your printing needs.
Hosting services for fctv.org are provided by Meganet Communications. Meganet offers a wide array of internet services including Mega Backup Cloud Service, server colocation, T1, fiber, Metro Ethernet, as well as telephone services such as hosted PBX and digital voice. Their number one goal is to keep your communications network up and running and allow you to focus on growing your business. 877-634-2638 or meganet.net.
Good evening. Welcome, everyone, to the September 23rd Board of Selectmen meeting. If you would just join me first in a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. We have a couple of proclamations tonight. We have, the first is honoring Gil Raposa for so many years. It's hard to, when you look at some of these numbers, they're pretty impressive. So let me read this proclamation. Whereas Gil Raposa has been an active member of the Falmouth Theatre Guild for 61 years. He joined the group in 1958, performing his first role as a prisoner in the play Stalag 17 in 1960, the first show that the Falmouth Theatre Guild performed on the stage at Highfield Theatre. And whereas over the years, Gil Raposa has remained active in the Guild, both on stage as an actor, singer, dancer in 98 productions, and has served as either director, assistant director, or choreographer for 15 years. 15. Off stage, he has utilized his artistic talents designing sets, costumes, posters, programs, dressing sets, and decorating the theater both inside and out. And whereas Gil Raposa has served as the board of directors of the Theatre Guild for most of this time, serving as vice president, secretary, chairman of the play reading and scholarship committees, and 9 years as a board director. Most recently has served as historian, archiving photographs, articles, and memorabilia for past productions until now. And whereas Gil Raposa shared his artistic talents with the children and families of Falmouth for 30 years, retiring in 1989 as an art teacher in the Falmouth Public Schools, serving children in grades kindergarten through 8th grade. And whereas Gil Raposa, through his dedication and commitment to sharing his time and talents to the Falmouth Theatre Guild, has been at the forefront of entertainment in the town of Falmouth, selflessly and enthusiastically bringing quality theater and abundant joy to generations of families for 61 years. Now, therefore, we, Megan English Braga, Douglas C. Brown, Douglas H. Jones, Susan L. Moran, and Samuel H. Patterson, as selectmen of the town of Falmouth, by the authority vested in us, do hereby officially proclaim as selectmen the town of Falmouth the Sunday, September 29th, 2019, to be Gil Raposa Day in the town of Falmouth.
Second.
Mr. Raposa, if you wanted to come up, we won't put you on the spot. I will just say that all of those accolades, Mr. Raposa was my art teacher, and I tried really hard. Art was not my strength or my forte, but I enjoyed all of that elementary school time doing art, and really just so incredible. It's one of those gifts that we have in Falmouth, that people become part of our community and just give for literally decades in so many different ways. And that's just a part of what you've done and the impact that you've made in this community. So thank you so very much, and congratulations. Thank you very much. I know I had a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. Congratulations. Oh, sorry. And I have another proclamation. Ms. Moran, do you want to?
This is for the 100th birthday celebration for Alfred G. Irish. Whereas Alfred George Irish, born October 13, 1990 in New Bedford, Massachusetts, and a Falmouth resident since 1927, will be 100 years old on October 13, 2019. Whereas Alfred, a member of the greatest generation, was drafted during the World War II to the Signal Intelligence Service for cryptology for the Army. He applied and was accepted to Officer Candidate School. He achieved the rank of corporal. Alfred graduated Lawrence High School in 1937, Northeastern University is 1942, with a degree in business administration, and was a Falmouth town meeting member for 15 years. Whereas Alfred joined St. Barnabas Memorial Church on March 15, 1961. During that time, he was a member of the vestry for 14 years, a senior warden for 4 of those years, and treasurer for 7. He was chairman of the Barron's Fund for 13 years, finance committee member for 15, and an usher for 48 years. He was married at St. Barnabas to his wife Esther in September of 1954. Whereas Alfred was director of the Falmouth Historical Society for 9 years, treasurer for 8, and property committee member for 1 year. In 2002, Alfred was voted the Notable Person of the Year for the Falmouth Heritage Award. Whereas Alfred has been a member of the Falmouth Marine Lodge since 1961 and received his 50-year medal in 2011, he held posts of Master Mason for 1 year, Past Master for 48 years. On December 1, 2014, he was awarded the highest honor of the Grand Master Masons, the Joseph Warren Medal, which is bestowed only to those Masons who have demonstrated their devotion, dedication, and significant contribution to their community, church, and Masonry. Whereas Alfred was a treasurer and director for the Samaritans organization for 7 years in the 1980s, he was director for Belvedere Plains Association for 6, and he served as director of Oak Grove Cemetery for 26 years until April of 2016, and as treasurer for 20. Whereas Alfred has been a board member of the Falmouth Commodores for the past 17 years and was voted a lifetime member. During those years, he worked the front gate and several times throughout the first pitch. He was honored on July 9, 2013 with an Al Irish Appreciation Night. Whereas Alfred has been a longtime member of the Hall of Fame Committee of Cape Cod Baseball League, and in 2007 was honored by the committee with a Lifetime Achievement Award. Whereas Alfred has had his historical debut in the Falmouth book Local Legends. Now therefore, the Board of Selectmen of Falmouth do hereby proclaim Sunday, October 13, 2019 as Alfred G. Irish Day. In witness whereof, we, Megan English Braga, Doug Brown, Doug Jones, Susan Moran, Samuel Patterson, have hereto set our hand and caused the great sale of the town of Falmouth to be affixed on this 23rd day of September 2019.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Incredible achievements. I think we should have another standing.
Happy birthday.
My name is David, I'm his son.
Please come right up. Please come right up. Pretty special to hear from the family.
Well, I don't have too much additional to add to what you said. I mean, he's been very active his entire life. He's had a 34-year, retirement, model retirement, and as you can tell, he's very active in community affairs, and some of you may know him. He would have been here tonight, but unfortunately, he's an Atria, and he really didn't feel like he could make it. But I said that I would definitely come and honor him. And
Any chance he's watching it on television?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Well, he can, because it'll be archived, so.
We've just moved him from place to park at Atria,
Yep.
so we're waiting for Comcast tomorrow at 12 noon to sign him up. So that's it. But he's really had quite a life and a real role model.
Indeed.
So yeah,
It's the kind of thing Falmouth depends on.
yeah, I would say so. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll give you
Thank
this
you.
proclamation.
I will.
Perfect.
And you can watch it on FCTV.
At any time.
At any time.
Yep.
You can even get a little tape if you want for the kids.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very
Very
much.
nice to meet you.
David?
And just for recognition tonight, I just wanted to note, I hope that we'll there are some, certainly always folks in our community that are dealing with significant health issues, but just, in particular, thinking tonight about the Swain family and Ahmed's family, who are dealing with family members with cancer and some pretty tough diagnoses. So just to keep them in our thoughts and lift them up in any way that we can. Always opportunities to support, even if it's just a kind word, an email, or a card. So thinking of those members of our community and wishing them the best. So just a moment of silence to keep them in our thoughts. Thank you. Any announcements from the board? No? Okay. Now we have time for public comment. Just to remind folks, public comment is an opportunity for folks here to speak about something that's not on our agenda tonight, and you have up to 2 minutes. And we just ask that you don't, speak directly about any individual. And unfortunately, because it's public comment and because it's not on our agenda, we can't respond to you. But if anybody with all of that being said, wants to get up and make a comment, please just let me know. Yeah, Ms. Bumpus.
I'm Catherine Bumpus, and as some of you know, yesterday the Woods Hole Community Association had a special event on Water Street in Woods Hole, and there were a lot of logistics involved in it, and I have to say that we very much appreciated the town's support and how our interaction went from the event. I'm actually going to break your rules and talk about a couple people specifically. I know Diane fielded some phone calls. Jim Grady was very helpful. Setting up the detail with the police department was very professional and easy. And the folks that showed up, the guys in the dump trucks, our detail officers, the bridge tender, all represented the town really well. So it was appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And to clarify, you can always say nice things about me. I should have said, we don't disparage people because they can't respond back to you, so thank you. All right, going to summary of actions. We have approved application for a special one-day wine and malt liquor license, British Beer Company, 263 Grand Avenue, Seaside Inn parking area, outdoor food and music festival, Sunday, 10/13/2019.
Move approval?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Approve application for Sunday entertainment license, British Beer Company Lennon Fest, Falmouth Heights Ball Field, Sunday, 10/13/2017.
Motion to approve?
Second.
I just have one question, actually, for this one and the next one, about the sound for these outside of the area of these events. The Lennon Fest I'm not as concerned about because it's during the day, but the next one I do have some concern about how far away the sound can be heard.
Okay.
So on that discussion, I would be ready for a vote.
Okay. So on the Lennon Fest, do we have a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. The next one, I'm not sure actually. Is this for the Lennon Fest?
Yep.
Okay, so I don't know where we, I guess just down here. Okay, thank you. Next, we have approve application for one-day entertainment license, Shirley Baker Wedding Event at Highfield Hall, South Lawn, 56 Highfield Drive, Falmouth, on 7/18/2020.
So my question on this one is, I know in the past that they've been concerned with the sound traveling to the neighborhoods from that venue, if it can be heard outside the tent. And I wasn't sure if that's something we need to deal with or how that actually works on this kind of license.
Okay. Mr. Suso or Mr. Johnson-Staub, do you have any input?
Well,
on
we can
that?
certainly alert the
Applicant?
applicant that that's a concern, and in the spirit of the selectmen's concern, ask that the sound system be appropriately set so that it's not traveling beyond the boundaries of Highfield and the tent.
I'm just taking a look to see if there's any.
With that stated, we'll move approval.
Okay. Do I have a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. And so if you'll just convey that, please.
We will.
Thank you. Approve application for a change of manager of an all-alcohol liquor license, victual license, the Black Dog Heights Cafe located at 465 Grand Avenue, Falmouth. Does anyone have any questions about this? This is the applicant present. Come on up. Bless you. Welcome. You just introduce yourselves?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair and the board. My name's Matthew Terry from the law firm of Lama & Clower here in town. I'm the attorney for the applicant, the Black Dog Company.
My name is Joseph Elia. I am the executive chef and general manager at the Black Dog Heights.
Okay. So this is a change from Ms. Gillick?
That's correct. Yeah, we're making a personnel change.
Okay.
And Mr. Elia is the executive chef, but is also in charge of the entire cafe and does all of the front of the house work as well. This is a small operation. It has 14 seats inside, and does not have a separate standalone bar. Drinks are ordered along with the food, cafeteria style at the desks at the front counter that Joe mans, and then they're delivered to everyone's seats. So that's kind of the logistical setup.
No change in what the setup has been.
Correct.
And the delivery can be both inside the building and outside the building?
Yes.
Okay, just, in some ways, this does tie in a little bit to the tea shanty that we had,
Tea room, yeah.
the tea room out in New Silver Beach, and I want to make sure we're consistent with that. Have you been an alcohol manager before?
Yep, tip certified, plus I have 2 staff members on hand that are managers that are tip certified as well.
And you live in Falmouth?
Yep.
Okay, and so you know, the only reason we ask these questions is you're aware that anything that goes on there from alcohol, you're responsible for, and we'll come back to you and say, were you aware this is going on? You don't have to be on the premises all the time, but ostensibly you are responsible every single time. Okay, great.
And just to your point about the tea room, I know this area definitely has that sort of, physical structure that blocks, their space where their seating is from kind of an outside general area. I mean, you have those, the dividers, in other words, so, which I think we had some questions about with the tea room. Okay, any other further questions for the applicant?
I move approval.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, under administrative orders, vote to approve grant of license for Shumet Valley Property Owners Incorporated to place, erect, and maintain a sign to be located within the town, layout of Club Valley Drive. Is the applicant present? Did anyone have any questions about this?
This is the second time we've seen it, right?
Yes.
It came to us first for the initial approval. I
Yeah.
move approval of this license.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Here we have to. That's a notary, that somebody else does that, right? Yes. Okay. Sorry, 2 copies on this one, okay. Vote to approve a temporary easement for access from Gifford Street to the project site at 430 Locust Field Road. Is anyone here for this tonight? Okay. Everybody get a chance to take a look at what's in the packet?
Seems reasonable.
Any questions?
Motion to approve?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Same with this, 2 copies? Okay. Vote to accept donation from the Heron Project, the amount of $700 to the Recreation Department donation account.
Move approval.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, great, thank you very much. Okay. Approve Eversource Energy petition to install 2 poles on St. Mark's Road south of Seabrook Drive. Any questions on this?
I would like to put this on the table until we hear from the presentation.
Is that good with everybody?
Agreed?
Sure.
Do we have to vote that? I don't think so. Right?
Thank you.
Sorry.
Hold it.
Just hold it, okay. Let's see, vote to approve regulatory agreement for affordable housing located at 0 Locust Field Road and authorize town manager to execute. Mr. Suso, do you just wanna?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. This is the project regulatory agreement that the town council has overseen and the board has authorized be executed, and we just bring it to you for completion purposes.
Okay. Any questions on this or any discussion?
Motion to approve?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Approve notice of intent, application to the Conservation Commission for Mill Pond. And just a reminder, I don't know if everyone saw it, we did get, oh no, that was about Article 17, disregard that, sorry. We did get something from Concom. Does anyone have any questions about this particular? Mr. Suso, do you want to just speak to what it is?
Madam Chair, I can. I know we have Kristen Rathjen from Science Wares is with us
Great.
as well. Kristen, did you have some PowerPoint slides or just? If it would be appropriate,
Sure.
we can put up the PowerPoint slides. I can advise the board that this is a project that I have heard reported on multiple occasions when I've attended the East Falmouth Village Association meetings, and Selectman Doug Brown, who's not able to be with us this evening, has been heavily involved in this initiative as well. So this proposal is reasonably well-known to me in terms of its progression through the steps. So Kristen is with ScienceWare as a consultant that's working with the Water Quality Management Committee in the town. And I'll be quiet and let her make her presentation.
Great, and we have talked about this before, so this isn't the first
Yes.
time we've heard about this concern, so.
Kristen, you
welcome.
probably want to pull down that microphone a little bit so we can make sure that folks at home can hear you.
Kristen Rathjen, Technical Consultant, Water Quality Management Committee. So what we're seeking to do is essentially harvest the macrophytes that plague Mill Pond. So these are some images. This was early this season, around June. This was last year. The issue with Mill Pond is there's excess nutrients in the pond, which causes excessive plant growth. So what we're proposing to do is essentially mow the lawn in Mill Pond. So cut the surface vegetation, remove that matter, remove some of the source of nitrogen. When those plants die off, they decay in the pond and they fuel more nitrogen, more nutrients for further growth the next season. The type of plant that's the biggest plague, this is water shield. So it looks kind of like a lily, but it's not. People actually like the lilies. They don't like the water shield. So we're looking to initially harvest during the same time that the upstream cranberry bog operation is harvesting, so that water in Mill Pond is relatively static, so we're not shooting anything down into Green Pond. We've also put in our NOI to potentially add aeration to the sediments. Anything to help the waters mix in the pond, to help oxygen be delivered to the sediments so that nitrogen can be removed by the bacterial communities down there. So this is an iterative process. It's just like cutting your grass, has to be done more than one occasion. But the more it gets done, the less nutrients are available for further plant growth. And what it means for Green Pond is Mill Pond does a fantastic job of attenuating the nutrients upstream from the cranberry bog. So it just opens more opportunity to stop nutrient loading into Green Pond at the head. So that's what we're looking to do.
Is there anything purposeful that can be done with what we've mowed?
Besides composting it, at this point, no. There's no market for plant debris turning into fertilizer. We've explored options. I believe the upstream bog owner has said that we can put some of the plant matter up there, which essentially will recycle some of the nutrients that way. But at this point, we don't have an avenue to turn it into fertilizer.
I mean, is it something that actually Compost With Me would be thrilled to have, just to increase their supply of it?
Potentially, yes.
Great. So
Because
maybe
it's
we can-
coming from a freshwater body, so there's not a salinity issue coming with it.
Yeah.
I just also want to credit, this particular issue started with a grassroots effort of neighbors being concerned about their pond. And Doug and I, I was a member at the time of East Falmouth, and we invited Eric Turkington to a meeting who fielded a lot of questions. And so this is just an example of what a village association can spur in terms of real interest and real positive impact for the community, their neighborhood, and the town. So
Yes.
thanks to those folks.
There's been extensive work done. There was a master's student with University of Massachusetts who devoted 2.5 years of her life to the pond and still does work on the pond, who cares very deeply, who's been very much involved, and a lot of her information is what's helping us pursue our actions.
And her supervisor, the professor that was
Yes.
involved.
Yes, Brian House as well.
That's great, and it's a great, every pond, every ecosystem is different, but it's great to sort of think about, how we address each one, because we have obviously other systems that are in need of not necessarily the same type of,
Right.
same type of work being done to it, but some kind of intervention. So I think it's great to be able to have that community problem solving, bring in those resources so that we can really try and attack some of these things that have just been plaguing this pond for quite a while.
Right, so
We
we're
hear about
looking
every
at
year.
this as potentially the pilot project to see what else could be done for some of the other freshwater bodies in town from water quality's perspective. Let's see what we can do here and how it works out and see how we can expand that.
Great. Any further questions?
I move approval of the notice of intent application.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you so much. Great.
Thank you.
All right, under special events, we have reoccurring recommended Lennon Fest, British Beer Company, Falmouth Heights Ball Field, Sunday, 10/13/2019, something that we've seen.
We should probably approve this since we've already approved the liquor license and the
Be awkward not to, right?
Second.
entertainment license.
All those in favor?
Before we go on, I just want to stress the facility permit policy of our recreation department. We're trying to keep better control on the use of our fields, especially in wet, muddy conditions. So will a copy automatically be sent to them so that it's no surprise?
Yes, we'll-
Recreation, yeah, they're part of the pre-approval process.
Okay, good, thanks.
Yes, I just think that what Sam is saying is making sure that, you know, if it's a rainy, muddy day, I think that's what, you know.
But they need to know ahead of time
Yes,
so they can
what the policy is.
anticipate. If they can see that they're gonna have a really wet period, maybe they can warn all the people ahead of time.
So, just to be aware of that so that we take care of the fields. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, go. Okay. We have under business, a report by the school committee, and I think Bill Ryder and our superintendent Lori Jour are here. Welcome. Come on up.
Good evening. Thank you for having us this evening. We wanted to give a few updates, highlights over the last year to share. We had a smooth start to the school year. Our enrollment is 3,320 students this year. We had another jump in our school choice numbers, and we are now at 172 students choicing into our Falmouth Public Schools. That's almost tripled in the last 7 years. Our demographics have remained similar to last school year. Our English language learners and students with disabilities has increased slightly over last year, and our economic disadvantaged students has increased almost 3 percentage points. Safety, you know that in Falmouth we take safety and security very seriously, and over the years we've had many plans. This past year, we've increased our training with Alice. We've partnered with the Falmouth Public Schools. They have now trained all of our staff, and we have a maintenance plan where they're training all new staff that come in. We have teachers now trained in Alice from every school that can be trainers, so they can help and support. The Alice teaches the adults just more options. ALICE stands for Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, and Evacuate. And so there's just more options depending on the situation. It's also important that our staff have the best communication, so we have purchased a web-based system that will allow the police department, fire department, and our administrators to communicate with staff at all times, and for staff to be able to communicate back about the whereabouts of our students. So we think that these extra steps have certainly continued to make our efforts for our students safe. We restructured our wellness committee last year, and we certainly are continued to be focused on health and wellness, good eating and exercise. But last year, parents came to us asking for help around a very serious issue, and that issue is the epidemic of vaping. And it has taken our students by storm. And so we took this very seriously. We spent the first half of last year studying the problem with partnering up with the Falmouth Human Services, Barnstable County Human Services, Gosnell, our nurses and other staff, some staff from other districts as well, so that we could learn as much as we could. And then we created 3 presentations for our families last year that was led by the Seven Hills Behavioral Health Department and Dr. Splain from Cape Cod Health, and just gave facts and action steps for our parents. And we've also added lessons to our health classes. And so we are going to continue to face that, as you know, we continue to see in the news that it is still a very serious topic that we're going to take very seriously. On a positive note, we were able to begin 2 unified sports teams last year, basketball and track, and we were just recognized by Special Olympics as a unified champion school for our commitment to fostering a social, inclusive school climate that emphasizes acceptance, respect, and human dignity for all students. It's a very proud reward to accept, so we're happy
Could you
with it.
just, for folks at home who maybe don't know, could you just explain what a unified
Unified
program
sports?
for, unified sports means?
It's an opportunity for students that may not be able to make the sports teams and their peers to work together. And there's many districts that have unified sports, so they actually, they are teams, they have their team jerseys, they play, they compete, and so it's a wonderful thing that everyone gets to have a team jersey and play sports that they like to play. So, a fun thing that I instituted last year, and I'm going to continue this year, is that the superintendent's student advisory. Student voice is very important to me, and so 2 students from every school was nominated. They met with me 4 times during the year, where they shared from their perspective what's happening in the schools, what they like, what they would like to improve on, but it was really their perspective, and that certainly, that student voice in any action planning is extremely important. We developed our partnership with Woods Hole, and we have worked hard with all 7 of the institutes in developing new strands of learning for our students. The first is titled The Marine Life and Ecosystems. The second strand is mapping and geography, and the third is human impacts on the environment. And so all this learning will impact the different grade levels in one way or another, but we're going to continue. We formed an advisory committee from Woods Hole, and they're going to continue to help create and elevate learning for our students so that they have that relevant hands-on experiences. And we're so close to be able to do that. Our student social and emotional needs continue to grow. We have school adjustment counselors. We have Gosnell that complements our counselors that with services for students with more intensive needs. We partner with Commerce Choice. We have Peace Builders program at the elementary schools. We have the bridge programs at Lawrence and the high school, and yet our needs are still great. And so this year we have received training from Restorative Justice. And we are going to study more about what we can do to help students have peer mediation, ask questions, work out their differences. And restorative justice, I believe, began in the court system, that's my understanding, where they worked to bring together the communities after crimes have been committed. And so it works the same way in the schools, is that where we help to make amends and reintegrate students back into the school community. So we're gonna, that will be a project this year that we're going to add to just continue to try to help students in respectful ways and keep students in school.
And are you working with some of the folks here in the community who have, I know there's a large group of folks who have been working on restorative justice for a while.
So we've met with them a few times, and yes, absolutely. You know, the circles that's happening in the community are very exciting, and so those circles are very similar when we work with students in the schools as well.
That's great.
Yeah. So
thank you.
And so our chair has a few more updates for us. So Mr. Bill Ryder,
come on up.
Thank you. I have to go back to August 27th. To the community, to the school district, was an extremely important day. That was the day we broke in the field with a band. With the community's support, several selectmen, community leaders, superintendent, teachers, administrators, we had athletes there, and we did a ribbon cutting. And I can't thank this community enough for the commitment, the dedication, and the opportunities that this is going to present to our students and this community. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Because there was a lot of research done. There was a lot of openness within the community structure as far as getting out the knowledge of the turf, the concerns with the turf, and it became a town meeting proposition, and the town meeting gave us a thumbs up and said, we're going to put it on the ballot, and we're going to let the voters vote for it. And for a long process and a long time period, the 27th was a great day for this community, especially the kids at Falmouth High School and the kids in this community, because the youth teams are already beginning to use it. I think that's just fantastic.
I mean, it's beautiful, and if people haven't looked at it yet,
Yep.
go. I was just telling someone yesterday, my dad, who grew up here and was visiting, I said, and played football at Falmouth High School, I said, you have to go and take a look at it, because I think, you can't really imagine what it was gonna look like until you
Yes.
go and see it. And the basketball court, the whole,
the whole-
the whole area is just
The whole
really
complex,
beautifully done.
and now the road race is dedicating money to the track. So the complex at the high school is going to be just outstanding. I like to use the term state-of-the-art. The other thing that was great was that 9/6, September 6th, the Falmouth Clippers opened the stadium in a pouring down rain event, and we didn't have to worry about mud. We didn't have to worry about digging up grass. We just had these little pellets flying all over the place. And they won. They beat Dartmouth 35-14, and I think it was just a great event. And fortunately, it wasn't on grass field, because that grass field after that game would have never been the same. So I think that's just a tremendous community endeavor. And again, thank you. One of the things the school committee is doing is we're looking to revise our mission statement, our vision, and our core values. And it's kind of interesting because as now a member in my 4th year, we kind of never even looked at that stuff. We gave a mission statement at the beginning of the meeting. We started looking into the core values and mission statements and our vision last year, and we're getting to the point where we're going to send out a survey to our students, to our parents and families, our teachers, our staff, to get some ideas of where we want to go. I think many times we just live with a mission statement as long as we can. And we kind of like to just look at our mission statement, our core values, and make a vision statement, and just probably make some small adjustments. I think some of the things that you look for is you want to cultivate partnerships. You want to provide opportunities for achievement. You want to challenge your learners. You want to inspire your learners. You want to empower your learners. I love to empower kids. Kids are our greatest asset. Kids are our greatest resource. We need to empower them. Secure learning environments, and obviously what our superintendent mentioned has always been foremost to me as a former principal, is the safety of our students and the staff. We're looking to collect data now, and we are, and hopefully get some analysis of that data in October, and then move forward with a few tidbits and a few adjustments within that. One of the last things I just want to mention is we have a 9-member board, 9-member school committee. And I think it's important to just kind of modify what the people of our school committee do. We have subcommittees. I think it becomes a total involvement or a total commitment. And I think that's important, because I think our people are committed to this. We're elected, and we need to perform as elected officials. We need to be dedicated to the task at hand, and that is obviously making Falmouth School District the best that it can be. Several of us are involved with the budget. And again, the budget committee is important for many aspects. One is the fact that we deal with the town. We deal with FinCom. And we have many meetings throughout the year with the town, as well as our school committee, as our budget committee. And again, in looking at what our needs are and within our limitations with the dollars and cents. I think that's important. Also, we're involved in negotiations right now. So a couple of the school committee people are on negotiations. We're negotiations with the teachers at this point in time, and we're making progress. And in negotiations, as everybody knows, progress is slow. We have a policy committee, and the policies have all been now looked at, completed, adjusted to meet our needs. And a lot of people have spent a lot of time on policy And when I look at policy, I just kind of read and go, I'm not really sure. So I'm glad we have other people on the committee who are much more policy-oriented than I am. We often, one of our, not only are we able to perform budget responsibilities, but we're also, one of our tasks is to evaluate the superintendent. So we do have a committee to look at the evaluation of the superintendent, and the state is now doing a rubric and a little bit of changes for that, so that will be a process we all go to. We have an affirmative action community representative, a Cape Cod collaborative representative, a special ed liaison. We have a VIPS representative. We have a Falmouth Educational Foundation liaison. And one of the things I must again applaud people here is the giving of this community to a variety of things, especially when I look at the school. The people who have donated money, obviously the Falmouth Education Foundation, who raises money and gives that to teachers for a variety of reasons. The road race, there are so many people in this community who give to needs and what this community needs is, and obviously education is part of that. We have somebody who does bill signing to look at, see how we're spending money, where we're spending money. Those are important things to look at. And we have a technology advisory person. Again, keeping up with stuff. One of the things that our kids are getting Chromebooks this year. Every student will have a Chromebook, which I think is obviously fascinating. And we have a health and wellness task force. So again, but I will leave you with a quote, because I usually do that. Quote, "The test of our progress is not whether we add to the abundance of those who have much. It is whether we provide enough for those who have little." FDR. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Thank you very much. And certainly we hope that we welcome you back at any time as you're moving along and retooling your mission statement. I think it's one of the things that's happened over the last few years, and Sam can probably speak to this with more perspective, but even from the budgetary process, I know from my time on Finance Committee, it's really evolved into such a collaborative, proactive discussion, as you noted, between the town, between the school department, really having discussions about needs and resources and how we're smart about what we're spending and how we get the best for our investment and meet the needs of our students. And that's something that really has truly changed in the last few years, that budgetary process has evolved into something I think that is far more productive and yields a better result. And that, I think, has just been one very clear sort of transformation, among many others that have taken place. But I don't think we can underestimate how important it is that those conversations, as you noted, go on throughout the year. And we really, we're able to show town meeting, we're able to show Finance Committee, really understand, where resources are being allocated. So that has been, I think, a wonderful change that's taken place.
You're absolutely right, Megan. And we know that I've only been here for a little over a year, and I just can't compliment the process enough. The support that we receive from the Finance Committee is just tremendous. And so thank you to the town and thank you to them. But very supportive, and it's really makes the process easy. And so it's the best I've ever seen, and I just thank the town again.
Good to hear that.
For one more compliment, because Falmouth is a great place to be. So, thank you.
Thank you for coming, and welcome back anytime.
Thanks to Patrick Murphy, who's our business person.
So you need to come to the mic.
It back and forth.
Yes,
Say it to the mic.
they just can't hear you.
People at home can't.
If you're going to compliment Patrick, he should be able to hear.
I'm usually loud, so a heads up for Patrick Murphy, who's our businessman at the school district, and who does the communication between the town as well as the school committee and our school budget program. And his articulation is great, not only with the budget, but also capital improvements and things that we need, and everybody's in need of that as we progress. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. Okay, next we have a report from Solid Waste Advisory Committee. I believe I saw Linda Davis come in. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the board, and management. The last time I was actually standing here, it was impromptu, and I was a bit critical of where we were going or where we were not going, particularly in regard to messaging and getting the word out as to what we need to recycle and what we need to put in our trash and those kinds of things. Well, I'm happy to say that the committee is working with Mr. McConerty to put out a brochure that will be mailed to all the residents so that they have a heads up on how to do their trash properly. So with that, the committee is optimistic.
Wait a minute.
But,
Where's my spelling?
yeah, just give them to us and
Throw
we'll
'em
pass
over
them
here.
out. Thank you. This is great, thank you. This is so great to have a really clear list of items like this. This is very helpful, thank you.
Thank you. Well, it was decided that with all the work that the members of the committee have done, and I'm one of 7 members, by the way, and I just want to give recognition to Chris Poloni, Amy Roth, Mark Finneran, Ruth Brazier, Alan Robinson, Zachary Ellis, who are dire workers at trying to make things happen here in town in regard to our waste situation. It was decided that we would make recommendations rather than tell you about all the events we went to promote zero waste reduction. It was perhaps more important to take what we have done in the last few years and put them in recommendation form for you. Obviously, we don't expect discussion on these tonight. We're asking you to sort of take them under advisement, but we would like you to get back to us, a yay or nay, with some explanations along the way. There are 9 recommendations. We feel some are more important than others, and so let's take a look at them. And for the public here who doesn't have any of these, I will briefly repeat what is in front of me. First of all, the Solid Waste Advisory Committee respectfully requests that the Board of Selectmen consider the following recommendations for solid municipal waste and respond accordingly. First recommendation, to move forward with a Massachusetts DEP recycling IQ kit for implementation in spring of 2020. More discussion is needed to determine the town's readiness to move forward, including staffing and management of the grant. Now, we have had some meetings in regard to this, but this IQ kit that comes from the state is willing to do its part by providing funds and materials to help this town get on track with recycling. But we have to be able to provide the manpower and other resources in order to do this properly. So we have been discussing, and we need to discuss more, whether we can actually implement this. There's some deadlines here, and the committee's feeling is by December 15th, we should know if we're ready to take the grant in 2020. If not, then it's something to look for in the future or to work on. So that's number 1. Number 2, to move forward with a drafting of a recycling bylaw already approved by the Board of Selectmen with possible readiness for the 2020 spring town meeting. One meeting was initiated earlier this year with town personnel. We think that in order for that to be viable, we need to make a decision on it by January 1 of 2020. The third one, and I don't know, I think everybody from the school committee is left here, but number 3, to move forward in cooperation with the Falmouth School Department to develop a system-wide program for doing trash right in the schools. The Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection has programs, kits, and other resources available to ensure success. And there has to be a movement on that. People talk about it. I appeared before the school committee several years ago. That really didn't go anywhere. There has to be leadership. Number 4, to improve the town's communication with its residents and visitors on trash and recycling through direct mailings, which we're going to have one, yay, display ads, and in the print media, FCTV, and updated information on the town's website. And to look at that, all of that, and to come up with a plan as early as of October. Some of it can be implemented. Some things require more effort. I'd like to see a display ad always in the media, in the Enterprise, for example, that lists what people should and should be doing with their trash. I mean, but that's a decision that has to be made by management. And what's involved? Is there a cost involved? I don't know. Okay, next one. To encourage more town personnel to attend these DEP workshops on zero waste. Many of the Solid Waste Advisory Committee members have attended these very, very informative sessions, and we have met DPW directors, town managers, finance directors, crew chiefs, selectmen, and members from their own solid waste committees from other towns. And we've shared common issues, frustrations, and sometimes solutions. So we want to encourage DPW personnel, yourself, management, to attend some of these, because you learn a lot, for one thing. You stay in the forefront of what's developing, but you also connect with other people who have some of the same issues and problems and aggravations that we do in trying to create an effective and cost-efficient system. So we would like to see more of our own personnel attend those meetings. Number 6, to prepare for the 2022 contract for municipal solid waste pickup, that's residential curbside and municipal buildings. This is an opportunity to look at the long and short haul for waste removal in Falmouth. What will Falmouth's request demands be in this new contract? New recycling bins compatible with the hauler's trucks, for example? We need to begin review and discussions in spring of 2020, and that's just right around the corner. Number 7, to review the original and subsequent waste management facility plans for their applicability in updating the facility, address current issues, and make necessary improvements. There has been a plan, actually an additional plan, on what to do with the waste management facility, to improve it on a variety of levels. I'm not going to go into the specifics, but we have all the documentation on it. Included are making a priority of streamlining the computer system at the gate and addressing safety and health issues at the office trailer. Those two things need to be done by December 15th. I mean, we feel strongly about that. Those conditions out there are not satisfactory. And if you haven't been out there, go out there. Have someone demonstrate to you how that computer system works, why it fails, and how it's archaic for what they are doing in trying to record people coming in, processing credit cards. As a matter of fact, I think it was 2 years ago, I brought in a consultant to look at it. I had the crew chief explain what the problems were. This guy was on the mark. He said, it can be easily remedied. All right? That went nowhere. He was willing to talk to the town. He was willing to make some suggestions. That system is still in place. That's got to change. And then there are also other issues with the waste management facility, addressing the swap shop needs and improvements, monitoring the contracts with haulers of materials from the waste management facility. No one looks at that. Right now, we are renting something that's not being used. Hello? What's with that? So there are a lot of little things like that accumulate and cost the town money. You need to look at that, and that That should be a spring issue for you people also. Number 8, to add to the packet of information given to individuals and organizations when securing permission to use public spaces for events, beach, weddings, road races, a waste and recycling plan. That should be included in that package that they get. And it's not just, being responsible for the trash, have somebody haul it out. What's in the trash, how it needs to be separated, and where it can go. And then, of course, you look at all these recommendations, there's a lot of things to be done. Who's going to do them? So now we get back to number 9 again, the squeaky wheel. To appoint a solid waste manager as voted by town meeting. If the town has reasons for not creating a solid waste division headed by a solid waste manager, please explain. Are there other options for leadership and execution for the above recommendations? Is there another way to have someone be in charge of waste issues? A part-time person? Someone within the department already? But it's really, I think, impossible for Mr. McConerty and Mr. Grady to take responsibility for this trash, municipal solid waste in this town, and do all the other things that they have to do.
And we did, that piece we did address at the last time, I think when you were before us, that's something that Mr. Suso is looking at to put forward as a potential, something that's going to come to town meeting in the, what we were talking about, potential timeline.
Next fiscal year budget.
Next fiscal year budget to put in
April
for,
town meeting.
Okay.
for that. We
Well-
mentioned that at the last time.
We just want to remind you.
He's working on it.
Okay.
That budget's already, that's already in
Good.
the works, so.
This is,
So
again,
it's
I'm
something to
optimistic.
take a look at.
Cautiously optimistic. Anyway, these are the recommendations, and we'd like you to look them over, discuss them, and come back to the Solid Waste Advisory Committee with some responses. We are very willing to work with those decision makers, those who are also going to implement some of these things. I mean, we're here for you to do that. But without leadership and without authority, nothing gets done. And that's why we look to you guys.
Thank you.
So go get them.
Sue, thank you, Linda.
So I'd like to propose that the Board of Selectmen task the town manager with reviewing the recommendations and attaching costs to all of the recommendations as best we know. There certainly is lots of publicity about the fact that recycling is changing. The cost is changing. China is no longer accepting many materials. There are going to be astronomical increases in the cost of recycling, therefore trash pickup. Falmouth being one of the few towns that even has decided to afford curbside pickup. So so all of these recommendations, we really owe the committee response, and certainly the town manager can read on to the, as much as can be done by the requested deadlines. One thing I want to add to that request would be that food waste be looked at, because we certainly can invite folks in town who deal with trash to give their opinion, and one came up to me at the road race, in fact, and said, do you know the cost of food waste? It's probably the highest cost that we have in our trash, and so if we were able to be more efficient with just that element, we might be able to save people enough money that we could continue curbside pickup. So all of these things, I think the key is, where do the taxpayers want to spend their money? A new fire station, a solid waste manager. It's really a matter of the cost-benefit analysis, and people who do pay the taxes and who are responsible for the town budget need to be able to analyze the specifics of the requests brought by the committee to the Board of Selectmen along with the cost. So I want to make that request.
And
Doug?
comment also make on item number 6, was preparing for the 2022 contract for municipal solid waste pickup. Knowing when we went through the last contract, I know that process has already started in looking at what we're going to be doing. So while the recommendation is a request that the we begin discussions in spring 2020, that would be too late. I know we've already started looking into that, and
Good.
I'm sure we'll be pulling the Solid Waste Advisory Committee into that discussion, but I know there's no way we wouldn't be considering that contract already.
And that contract in particular, I mean, right now, I think it's fair to say we're getting a very good deal in the sense that because of the change with recycling, you know, our provider, there's a bit of a hit there because that market is in flux. Hopefully, and I think there is some data to support this, that there are going to be some shifts in the world of recycling, and that will play itself out. So, you know, it is something that you know is going to be. Always contracts are difficult, but this will be, I think, in particular, and that's probably what solid waste is pointing to. This is going to be a particularly challenging one because that market has changed so dramatically since the last time a contract was negotiated. Yes.
Just want to address the financial aspects of hiring someone. I mean, there are various ways to do that, and I certainly understand that in doing that, you are, you know, you have to take in consideration benefits and retirement and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I realize it's not. However, it may cost some money to institute some of these, to implement some of these programs. But what you also have to know that you may be saving money in the long run by developing and supporting a more efficient system. In other words, if we could get the word out to every resident in town, waste reduction, number one. Number two, recycling. And if people were doing it properly, that would save money for starters. If we had food waste taken out of the trash, and we know we pay by the ton, we pay by the pound.
Huge reduction.
It's huge. It's huge.
We talked about that with Carrie. I mean, it's the one
Yeah.
of the largest portions of your
so what I'm
waste.
saying is you've got to weigh both sides.
I think that's what Sue is saying. If we, you know, to sort of have some numbers attached to some of these things to think about, you know, how, just so that there's some education and information.
Oh, yeah,
on it.
and we have all of that, you know. And there's a place for it, but not here, no.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah?
Alan, did you?
Alan
have
is
one?
on the
Yep.
committee
Yep.
with me.
Thank you, Linda.
Alan Robinson. I was very happy to hear what Selectman Jones just said, that there's already discussions going on with regard to the 2022 contract, and that there's the town staff is looking into the finances for a solid waste manager. We're an advisory committee. We really are here to advise. One of the things that has frustrated us is we haven't been brought into these conversations. Here we are at the Solid Waste Committee. We meet monthly. We work together. We have a column in the paper, but we really don't feel like we're being consulted in an advisory capacity to the degree, to the resources that we have, and that we're volunteers. We want to contribute, and so we ask, you know, in things that like Linda has asked for, that we be engaged. Peter has reached out to Linda and us with regard to the flyer, and we're really, really excited that there's finally going to be something mailed to all of the residents. But we want to be, you know, there's no point being a volunteer committee person unless we're engaged. So we respectfully request, bring us into the conversation. Don't just do it all and then tell us what you're going to do.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Anything else?
I don't think so. Any other questions from the board or
Great
comments?
report, though.
No, great, and thank you. This is a really helpful thing to have.
Thank you very much, and I'm encouraged, so remember that.
We like that. All right, next we have a presentation on Eversource double poles.
So actually, at this time, I would suggest we bring go back to the item on the install two pools, just in case we have a question for Eversource on that one.
Okay, great. Welcome.
Welcome. Good evening. Madam Chairman Braga, is it?
Yes.
Members of the board, the residents that are here tonight, Mr. Suzo, with whom I've met. My name is Ronique Goldstein. I'm with Eversource Energy Community Relations. I was recently assigned the Cape and Martha's Vineyard. I personally live on the South Shore. and I was assigned the Cape when my colleague Bob Smith retired from the company. So I'm thankful that you're having me here tonight because I have an opportunity to introduce myself to the board. I have my business card if anyone wants my contact. I'm happy to give it to you at the end of my update. And I welcome emailing me, calling me, text me. I'm very receptive, as Mr. Souza will tell you. I'm very receptive to communication. A little bit about my background. I've been with the company for about 1.5 years, and I came from a private water utility. So the water world speaks to me. I was there for a decade, but now I'm gas and electric. So, and some clean energy, some renewable energy projects that we have both on the Cape and on Martha's Vineyard, some battery storage, which is, for me, exciting. I think it's the way of the future, so it's really interesting to be part of that. And my group is also part of the wind power, so that the company is entering into. So tonight I am presenting some numbers, an update with regard to double poles, but I welcome any questions in general. If I don't have the answer tonight, I will either come back another evening or I will email the board the answers or Mr. Souza. So I have a visual rather than a presentation. Let's see, I think it's this. And I apologize if it's fuzzy. It's a little fuzzy. I thought, and it's cut off. So we're gonna work with it.
I think if
I didn't know
you
how
might
it
be
would
able
look.
to reduce it.
Could I?
If you go all the way
Can't
over
see.
to the right where it says percentage. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, it's hard to see what I'm doing here.
Sorry,
Here
yep.
we go. All right.
If you reduce it a little bit, or maybe Mr.
Over here, the
Johnson's top.
reduction?
I think
That's the
so.
zoom. I think
Yep.
you're right.
I think you might be able to fit your last category.
Okay. Now it's much smaller, but you have the full picture. So I thought it would be a good opportunity. I should say that I'm familiar with the town because I have been here many a time, and I've become acquainted with some of the staff. It's really my job. Community relations, we cover, I should have said this on the onset, we cover a lot of topics. Our main job is to interact with public officials, whether it is elected officials, appointed officials, community organizations, and town staff, and really be, for lack of a better term, the conduit between the utility and the communities. So I'm happy to be part of that group. That's what we do by day, or by blue sky, I should say, and then we have a very active role in our emergency response plan. I was actually at a training today up at our Mass Ave facility to become a unit leader here on the Cape. And that would be basically managing the liaisons that work the storms. Everybody has a storm duty in the utility, no exceptions. So a little bit, what I thought I would do today before I give you some numbers is just, if it's okay, I'm a visual person, so I thought it'd be good to get a visual of what is on the pole. I know double poles are not aesthetically pleasing, but we have to have, I think, a better understanding of the big picture of what is actually on the pole. So Eversource, formerly NSTAR, owns and maintains the poles in the town of Falmouth. And what do we have on the utility pole? So at the top is the electricity, and that's the primary, which is the top line, and the secondary, which feed into the transformer. And, the primary feeds into the transformer. It lowers the voltage so that the secondary line can feed homes at an appropriate voltage. Below that, you have a communication space, and that's typically 1 or 2 wires, sometimes 3. It could be your Comcast, your RCN, your what's the other name of the Open Cape. It could be fire alarm, any kind of communication line, and then at the bottom is Verizon. So all of the utilities take part in a database. There's a process. So I know the poles aren't pretty, but we have to go and follow a process step by step in order to remove them. And the process is that we all are part of a database called Engines, and we're told by this database all of the poles are in this database. All of the utilities have access to it. The towns have access to it, except the towns only have viewing access to what they have facilities on. So sometimes they're not seeing the full picture, and we can provide those numbers to them. We have access to the full picture. The process is that you go from the top down. We will remove, so we all know what a double pole is. We install a new pole. It may be because the pole needs to be replaced. It may be, oftentimes it's a reliability project, which I suspect the poles that are going under approval tonight have to do with some type of reliability or a new customer. We will install a new pole next to the old pole. That creates a double pole. And the old pole cannot be removed until all of the attachees move their facilities from the old pole to the new pole. It goes from the top down. So we remove our facilities, we put it into engines. That will basically ping, if you will, the next people on the pole, and so on and so forth, until Verizon moves their facilities, and then we can pull the pole. So what do we have for numbers? I believe last year, in July of 2018, my colleague and some folks from the service center did a presentation before you, and we had 84 double poles in the town of Falmouth. So right now, total count, including poles that are ready to be pulled and poles that need transfers, we have 59. And that was run last week. So one thing to keep in mind is you have new poles that are set, which will bring the number up, but then you remove poles, which will bring the number down. So I don't know if that gives you a broader picture. I mean, you can really slice and dice the data in a number of ways. You know, I do know that we've done, I had folks run a report from September 1st, 2018 to September 16th, 2019. We had done 51 transfers, us. You know, you can run the data however you want to run it. How many transfers did other utilities do? We really have to work as a team, all of the utilities, and we're dependent on one another to make this effort happen. One thing I should say is that if a pole is hit and we need to install a new one, we will do that transfer upon installation of the new pole. If that makes sense. I mean, the poles that are hit when someone, unfortunately, you know, drives into it. And I do know during storms, you know, for example, March 2018 storms, there were a fair amount of poles that were installed as a result of those storms.
And when you're saying you do the transfer, you mean at that point in time you transfer all of the utilities?
No, so that's one thing I should have noted. I had it in my mental notes. The rule of thumb is that we cannot touch each other's facilities. So that's part of, you know, if it were so easy, we would all, you know, we would all transfer each other's facilities, but we do not do that for a number of reasons. I will say there's a system in place. I think what sometimes is the holdback is all of the other, balancing all of the other needs. Reliability is a huge initiative for the utility. You know, we don't want anyone to be out during a storm. So in order to make that happen, where we can't control the weather, there are upgrades that need to happen to the system, where it's upgrading of switches, grid modernization. So that's where the double pole sometimes, I don't want to say it falls at the bottom of the list, but it kind of, other things move up the pecking order because reliability, you know, is more important than the double pole. Unless it's a safety issue, I will say.
I guess when the previous representative was here, I was a little confused actually what constitute a double pole. So the numbers you said were 84 and 59. Those are ones that have been reported, not actually having exist in town, right? It's a reporting of them, or is it actually you've gone and reviewed every single pole in the town of Falmouth and there are only 59 double poles?
No, it's data that we pull from the database. So all the polls, so you touch upon something interesting. We're only as good as the data that we have before us. So have there been cases where there's a poll that isn't in engines? Yes. But for the majority, you know, those polls that information is in the database.
As the previous gentleman, I thought it meant it was complaint driven, that only if the town had mentioned them were they actually included in the number. And there were some towns that on the database said that they only had 2 or 3 because no one had complained about it.
No, it's not based on, so the polls are in, polls whether they're double polls or not are in the database.
Okay.
I mean, all of that, all of our infrastructure is in the database.
That 59 is a very accurate count of.
Yeah, as of last week, it's a reliable source, sort of a whiz, I would say. One of the folks that I call upon, I say he's a whiz in engines. Engines is also a relatively new database, so I will say there's a learning curve for folks in all the utilities, not just Eversource. I'm hearing it from Verizon and from Comcast that they're figuring this new database out. And even the folks at the engines company, it's not a robust company that has many people seated that can answer questions. So it's, you know, it's going to take a little bit of time, I think, to get used to the database, but, you know, has there been inaccurate data? I have to be truthful. I think Greg, who presented before you last year, said, yeah, sometimes you show up and you're going to transfer to find that it's already been transferred, or you're going to pull a poll to find that Verizon's still on it. So sometimes the data, unfortunately, where it's a manual process and everybody has access to it, can also edit it. So there can be some margin of error in it. But I'd say it's pretty accurate.
I think the other reason we requested you to be here is that I think we've had a little frustration with the speed in which Eversource has wanted the town to respond to their requests, but we have not been able to get that same speed in responses to our request.
So I'm sorry, say that again?
We act quickly, but we can't get Eversource to do the same.
In general, or,
Yes.
or, okay.
And we've been a little frustrated where we've had things put on, said, Eversource, yeah, we'll get to that. And it's been a year before they get to it. And so we're just hoping to make sure that you get assurance from us, from you, that you'll be on it to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Yeah, I'm happy, like I said, I'm happy to be the conduit. I can't find a better word, but I'm happy to be the point of contact. I regularly,
It sounds like it's always Verizon's fault.
yeah, no, I'm not gonna say that. We
Well,
try
they're the
not to, we try not to throw each other under the bus.
But if they don't do it, it's not gonna get done, because the double pole cannot be removed until they do it.
Right, right. But, I mean, we could be, just full disclosure, we could be equal offenders in a town that's a Verizon set town that, you know, maybe I shouldn't be saying this, but it's the truth. We all have to work together and help each other out. We could be tying up the process if we're not, if we're not transferring, then the backlog is on us. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I do know where, go ahead.
No,
sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was going to say that some towns, you know, it may be helpful. I have not yet met, I stopped in to visit the Department of Public Works. I've met Jim McLaughlin, the town engineer, when you had the issue on the bridge earlier this summer on the bike path, and I did speak with him at length. I haven't met the DPW director, and sometimes it's helpful to have a discussion with DPW to say where are you seeing issues, or is there, quite honestly, is there, a double pole that's a real eyesore that we can be, then we'll tackle that one first. So we
great
do
to
we do
hear.
work with towns, if it's, we'll look at the data. I ran this kind of quickly, but we can look at how old is it. I didn't see any particularly old ones, and I know you're focused on Falmouth, which you should be because it's your town, but I will say relatively it's a pretty low number for the size of the town. I mean, this is a big town. So I don't know if that helps at all. A lot of times relativity doesn't.
This is where the numbers last year confused me, as we were told we had the highest number in the Cape. And the gentleman said, well, that's because of.
We're complainers or advocates, basically.
Right, that's because you've asked about it. And
The highest numbers of done that,
Of
ones that have
double
been
poles.
done?
No, of ones that hadn't been done.
Yeah,
And
no,
our
I
number
think there
was
was
way
some.
above any other
Yeah,
town.
the engines is nothing to do with complaints. So
Well,
it's just data
This is where it gets a little confusing, because he was pretty clear saying,
Yeah.
when we asked him, why is ours 84 and Barnstable was 12? Some number like that. He said, unbelievable, because I would think that size-wise that Barnstable might have more. I said, oh, that's just because of the way that we collect the data. And so now to hear this is a little bit.
Yeah, it could, to me, the number is, it all depends on what's happened in the town. Where the storm, was Falmouth, was there a tornado in Falmouth? No, it was in, Harwich was hard, so it really depends on what weather events you've had. So what's been, so that as a result of those weather events, we had to install new poles, which created double poles. A reliability project coming through. We have reliability projects in, say, the city of Newton. And they may have to install 30 new poles, which means there will be 30 new double poles for a project that's doing a good thing, but's creating the double poles. So it is kind of a moving target. Unfortunately, I know that's not great news, but we can bring those numbers down. And I'm confident that operations is looking both at this. I spoke to the area manager, and while I couldn't give you a specific approach for what the plan is to bring the number down in the next 6 months or the next year, I do know that they're having discussions now. What are the liability projects, which I know we've discussed with Mr. Suzo and maybe presenting those at a future meeting. what are the reliability projects, and how are we tackling double poles, and how do we do both at the same time? Because it is the same crew that does both, and it is the same crew that comes in and connects all these new customers. And as you probably are aware, the Cape is, new customer connects. Everybody wants to live on the Cape. So, so it's all of those, it's that juggling act, and I would say that the reliability really takes a pretty big priority.
So, two quick questions on customer service-oriented issues. One is, one of the large, higher costs of Open Cape include the fact that they have to essentially rent space on poles, and that can be very expensive. And so I just wondered if you had any insight into that. And then the second issue is really direct customer service. Remember last year there was an elderly woman that contacted me about the fact that her pole is evidently not owned by Eversource. It was a private pole, and so she was out in the dead of winter with no heat, no lights, and it ended up being an exorbitant cost above the average customer to get her turned on because she had to buy a pole. Or are you familiar with that, a similar situation?
So to the first one, I'm looking at you. May I call you Susan?
Sure. Yes.
I was going to say Ms. Moran or Moran. I'm not familiar with. I don't want to speak to the rental space or the leasing space on the pole. So that's something that I can check and come back to you on.
That would be great.
As far as private poles, there are private poles. As far as the cost, again, I can get back to you on that. I think it's unfortunate that you said this is an elderly woman. She was out. I always try to think that there might be another approach. I don't know whether the cost can be. As you know, we're a heavily regulated utility. People think of us as a private company, but we are. It's a different animal,
So,
and that we can't do things that we're not allowed to do. So I don't want to
Sure.
presume that anything.
So even though one pole looks exactly like another pole, she couldn't get the power, and I had to get her a generator, and it just seems to be, it's gonna happen more and more commonly. And I was told it relates back to Eversource, a different rendition of Eversource, buying Eversource, and negating a bunch of poles. So it's gonna be something that comes up more and more often in Falmouth. It would be really great to know if there
How
is
many of those are,
an efficient approach or a less costly approach.
Yeah, I'm going to write that down as well, and I can try to find out. How long ago was this, if you don't mind me asking?
Last year.
Last year.
Last winter.
As someone relatively new to the electrical universe, I always find it interesting that every town, some are Verizon sent, some are, I don't know how that came to be. I'm sure it's something that's in the history of the utilities, but it feels like, some will say that the utility pole should be the electric provider, because that is really sort of the most essential, although maybe teenagers want their internet and their Wi-Fi, but electricity is really, an essential service. So, folks could argue about that. I can't say how I feel one way or the other, but I've heard, I think it surprised me to find that it's split. And in some towns, it's half and half. In some cities, it's north of this is Verizon and south of that is Eversource.
So all of those would be in Engine,
Correct.
So it might be helpful for us to, just have you come back at some point after you've been able to kind of look at that data and find out how many poles that we have in town that are like that, just that are not Eversource, so that we have a sense of sort of, is there kind of a general area where there's some vulnerability for folks like that who may not realize? Because I think until something happens,
right,
you have no idea, you're not necessarily aware of. I think we just kind of go about our daily business and don't pay much attention. So it might be helpful to have that information.
And so it's how many private poles are there in town?
Yes, or
correct?
non-Eversource, because I
Right.
think that's probably what happened in this case.
Periodically, there's a Verizon, I know that in Verizon, sorry to interrupt, I know that periodically in a Verizon set town, there will be an Eversource pole. Here and there, that happens, so and there are private poles. Like on private property, for example, I was asked by a town recently to find out if the poles entering a school area are private. I said, well, are they in the street? No. Are they on the driveway? Yeah, they're probably private poles. So sometimes that's usually where the responsibility ends.
And so the process would be important. Why can't a pole be used if it's equally, solid? What's the process? How much does it generally cost? That kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah, just so people can understand that. I think that's.
Yeah, I think we're trying to get away from, sometimes there's poles in the somebody's backyard, because that's how it was built, and then the house, what came first, the chicken or the egg, but, and I say that loosely, but we're trying to steer away from the poles in people's backyards as much as we can, as much as it can be avoided. I don't know if there are any other general questions.
Questions from the board?
I want to make a pitch for our community impact grants. I know that has nothing to do with double poles, but I always forget to mention it, and it's a really great program. The requirement that it's not funds that are earmarked for any state or town or area, and the only requirement for the organization is that they have a 501c3 designation, and so I welcome the board sort of spreading the word on that. It can be, we really look for a diverse, we're open to any organization that wants to receive a grant, and they do that online at eversource.com.
And is the parameter of the grant something to do with, it's just anything to do with community?
So I'll give you examples. It can be a grant for food pantry. It can be a grant for an organization that packs, there was one on the Cape that requested from, I think, Bourne. I think it's called the Hope Factory. They put together little packets, pretty amazing little factory. They put together packets for Children's Hospital. So the kids that are in the hospital for a short stay, extended stay, they put together these incredible themed packets, and we gave them a grant. So, it really runs the gamut. It can be, and so we welcome those applications.
Great, thank you. And, yeah, Mr. Sousa?
Madam Chair, just on behalf of Selectman Brown, who's not able to be with us tonight, he had pointed out a double pole at the new Dunkin' Donuts at near Route 151, and right near the veterinarian offices. So I don't know if that is on the list, Ronit, or not.
Okay.
It's 1196 Sandwich Road is that new Dunkin' Donuts location. So we'll pass that along and be happy to confirm that in a follow-up email.
Okay, sure.
Good test case for engines.
Yes, exactly. See if it's in your.
Are we allowed to ask questions?
Sure, you have to come on up and just ask them through just introduce yourself and then just ask them through the board here. Okay.
Just a quick question.
Sure.
I'm Elmer Bartek. I live in East Falmouth, and I just had a question about if Eversource owns the pole, do you also own the property that the pole is sitting on, or is that town property?
No, typically we have to get a grant allocation for that pole, or would have had to have gotten rights to use.
So if there's
that
a double
space.
pole, then you're actually asking for two locations.
I suppose you could look at it that way, but the goal is to remove the old one, and there will only be one in its place. It's a pole attached to the other pole, so I'm not trying to answer that.
Wondering if there might be an incentive for us to get a single pole put there.
Well, I guess I'm confused. There will be a single pole once the old one is out.
And
Right.
while there's a double pole, is there a double charge for some sort of a
No,
I
I
don't
don't
think
think
there's a
so.
compensation to the
No,
town?
we
that
can
says-
have, Mr. Johnson-Staub can speak to that.
So
There's a charge to it. It's an easement.
Yeah, there is no charge or payment to rent or lease the space. There's a right-of-way agreement. There may be some taxable value based on the value of the equipment, but I understand the train of thought that you had, but it doesn't help us.
No incentive
Yeah.
to get rid
Yeah.
of them. Okay, thanks. Thank you.
I believe we're taxpayers in every single town that we operate in, so we are,
Great.
just like residents, I guess. The polls are at least.
Madam Chair, I know Ronit mentioned that she had not had the opportunity to meet our Director of Public Works, who's Ray Jack, but I should note that with us tonight is our Deputy Director of Public Works, Peter McConery, sitting in the front
Hi,
row.
nice to meet you.
And Peter's with us, and you might
My
want to
card
give
for
Peter
you.
one of your cards
Yeah, I
as well.
will.
I think that's a great suggestion because DPW, they're really the men and women that are out there that, know exactly where some of these, as you noted, some are more of an eyesore
Yeah.
than others, or more of a priority because of, where they're situated, and sometimes they are a little bit of a, sometimes I think they're a little bit of a danger, if they're blocking, where people can see and where they're driving, so DPW is really well aware of that, so I welcome that suggestion that you can, speak with them and they can kind of give you that, sort of priority list.
Yeah, sometimes the conversations, not that I don't want to give I could have brought a ton of data and a really long presentation before you tonight, but I thought sometimes those, and even the operations folks said, we can go sit down with DPW, we can discuss this, we can get a game plan. And oftentimes, and then report back again. So we can do both. Yeah, I think it's a good opportunity.
Is there any chance you're familiar with the application for St. Mark's Road that's before us tonight?
Unfortunately, I saw it just when I saw the agenda. It's 2 new poles, is that what it is? I would guess, and I wish I had not noticed it so late in the game, but I would guess that we really only apply for new poles if they're necessary. We recognize that.
Right, but the abutters have been requesting the repair or the straightening out of a adjacent pole at the same time. That when the hearing was held, the abutters to this property there for the new poles said,
Give her the picture.
it's fine, but could you straighten this pole that is leaning fairly substantially?
So
But it doesn't sound like you would have information to be able to assure
I
us
could
this
get
is-
it. I could get it. I don't, yeah.
Sure this is gonna
I'm just
happen.
gonna give you, this is the email from the abutters with pictures of the poles, and you can take that and then maybe get back to us on that piece. I think you'll see it as a fairly, if you look at the pictures, they're
May I keep
pretty, yes, that's for you to keep.
Yeah, unfortunately, I literally noticed it as I read the agenda on my way here. So the 2 poles are replacing
I think the 2
there are
poles
2
are
new
new.
poles, and the request was if you're gonna put these new poles in here, can you straighten out the other one?
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm not
And
sure
I
if
can
we went
certainly
back.
look into that.
We haven't done this yet.
Oftentimes, is the one that's leaning a double pole? Do you have any idea?
No, I don't
No,
think so.
the
The
pictures-
pictures are there.
Sometimes it's
yeah.
the
You have a
facilities pulling
photograph
on
of
it.
Yeah, I
You have
think
a
you have
photograph of it.
pictures of it in that pile, so
Okay.
it's just a single pole.
Yeah, it's got a,
A guy wire.
an anchor.
Yep.
Yeah, it has a
2
guy
of them.
wire and an anchor.
Yep.
Yeah, I can certainly look into it.
Thank you. Maybe you can just get back in touch with Mr. Suso with any information that you have on that, so we can let the butters know. Great, thank you so much.
Anything else?
I don't think
Good
so. Anything else?
presentation.
Yeah, great presentation, thank you. We do still have to vote these, the request for these 2 polls. We have,
The other item on the
Oh, I'm
agenda,
sorry, go ahead.
on this item.
Yep.
The other item that's mentioned by the abutters is that the reference to the poles in our approval is different than the location listed on our agenda.
yes,
And I
you
want-
did
not
note
su-
there was a slight,
I'm not sure if that's something,
Discrepancy.
is that too much of a discrepancy for us to actually consider tonight? That if it's listed on our agenda, or is it just describing these 2 poles in 2 different ways, but the location's still the same?
I believe they're just being described in 2 different ways. I believe
I'm
it's
just, I
the,
gave mine away to her, so can I just read his?
we can double check that with Public
One
Works.
talks about north of Neves Way, and the other one talks about being south of Seabrook Drive.
Yeah. Okay.
And I don't know exactly how far this is from Seabrook Drive to get that. I know where it is in relationship to Neves Way, but
Do you want to carry that and give us a chance to clarify?
Yes, and then we can also maybe have some, we
Sure.
meet on October 7th next.
Okay.
So maybe if we can have a little input on those leaning poles on that date, we wouldn't necessarily, ask that you come back here, but just if you can get us some information maybe.
Do you
on
happen to know
those.
who filed the application? Because typically we have a representative that will speak to.
This particular application,
Donna Rosa was the Eversource representative.
that's just who it says attention, so.
Yeah, typically, if it's a grander location of any underground, infrastructure or poles or any rights, typically we'll have, so.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, really appreciate it, thank you. Great. Okay, now we have an update on the committee email policy and access control protocol. Thank you. Actually, does anyone mind if I take this out of order since it's us? And just do some of these other things that people are sitting here for?
Yeah, no
Do
problem.
you know what, Peter? We're just gonna take that out of order for a minute and try and get some folks that are waiting here.
Smart.
Since you're stuck here with us, so.
Thank you.
All right, number 5, we have interview, vote, and appoint committee member for Cable Advisory Committee. Michael, I saw you here, come on up. Welcome. Just come introduce yourself.
My name is Michael Eder. I've been off the Cable Advisory Committee for 2 years. Part of that, I was on it for 7 years, I think.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions for Michael? I mean, he's sort of a known entity, and we're just very thankful that you're willing to
So you've been to some of these
serve
meetings
again.
before?
Yeah.
I've been actually to the new committee a few times. I think there's actually a bunch of people who want to do some work. They're looking for someone who's sort of been through the process before that can give them some guidance as to priorities. So I said, okay,
I just also want to add as the liaison, how much I welcome Michael's expertise and willing to research various important issues in this area, given that the license renewal is coming up, and I think it's a crucial time for you to be involved, so much appreciated.
Thank you. With that, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Just trying to remember the date of his appointment.
Oh, I know, I'm trying to find the,
Yeah, we're out of order here a little.
I don't actually see the,
I would move approval of Michael Eder being appointed to the Cable Advisory Committee, term ending June 2021 until we find other date it's supposed to be.
perfect.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great, thank you. Could we just look into that, clarify that,
Certainly,
Mr.
we'll
Suso?
clarify it.
Thank you. Welcome, Michael. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm gonna just do the presentations on the petition articles, because we have a number of folks who are waiting here for that as well. So we have, for these petitioner presentations, as noted on the agenda, it's a 5-minute presentation so that we can hear from everyone. And if we'll start with Article 17, Nathan Holcomb. Welcome. And this is actually the article that we did get some late-minute feedback from Conservation. Okay, thank you.
And just to clarify, this is not time for discussion, but are we allowed to ask the petitioner questions?
I believe we can ask the petitioner questions. We don't vote, we don't discuss it as a board, and we don't vote it tonight.
Right.
So-
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, great. Welcome. Would you just be the timekeeper?
Sure.
And I don't
Actually,
want to be
if
harsh.
there's-
and-
If there's somebody available to give me some guidance
Oh,
about how
sure,
to
before we
get the,
start your
because I think
time
they
going.
loaded the
Yep.
presentation to the computer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm not trying to be difficult, but I want to make sure everyone gets the same amount of time, so we'll be a little bit strict on the 5 minutes. I just don't want anyone to feel they've been shortchanged or we favored anybody else.
That's 2 down.
Yeah, yeah. You already started, yeah.
So it's Article 17?
That's the one.
All right. Just use the arrow keys.
Okay. Okay.
Great, welcome.
Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to say a few brief words about Article 17, which is a proposed amendment to the Wetlands Bylaw. The amendment is intended to address the fact that under the current bylaw,
Yep.
technical difficulty,
Oh, okay.
The arrow key?
The arrow
No.
key? No?
up arrow.
To the right.
There you go.
Under the current bylaw, if you have a puddle in your yard, or if your neighbor does, you can be subject to very stringent regulation. Puddles are not the valuable wetlands that the bylaw was intended to protect, and so this article is intended to fix that issue. This is the operative provision of the bylaw, which establishes the commission's jurisdiction, which essentially extends to any alteration of a wetland resource and the buffer zone 100 feet surrounding that resource. The proposed amendment would affect the definition of an isolated freshwater wetland. So that's a wetland that is not adjacent to a permanent water body, and where there is some exchange of water between the surface and the soil. And as a result, plants that like a wet habitat rather than a dry habitat tend to live. So it's a pretty broad definition. The proposed amendment would just set a size limit so that an area can qualify only if it's 10,000 square feet or more. The amendment would be narrow and targeted. It doesn't affect the definition of any other kind of wetland under the bylaw, such as vernal pools, et cetera. Point number 1, the amendment would prevent the waste of tax dollars. If you think about the kinds of wetlands that we want to use our resources to protect, you might think of something like Great Sipawicet Marsh, Wacoit Bay. These are fragile, ecosystems. They're valuable resources. We should do everything that we can to protect them. And the Conservation Commission has done and is doing very vital work to protect resources like this, so many more throughout the town of Falmouth. And it's because of the work that they're doing and have done that my children can enjoy the same resources that their great-grandparents enjoyed when they first bought their home in Falmouth in the 1960s. Now, this is my family's backyard. As you can see, there's a hill that sort of slopes down and a depression at the bottom. And if there's heavy rain, you sometimes get some water there. And so as a result, that counts as a wetland under the current bylaw. And that small kind of moist area triggers regulation of a much larger area, indicated in red here on this map, covers almost all of my family's property and also large portions of the neighbors' properties. It is not a good use of taxpayer money to protect wetlands like that. Point number 2, the amendment would prevent arbitrary and inconsistent enforcement of the bylaw. If a puddle counts as a wetland, then it's hard to know what's a wetland and what isn't. And according to the town website, the only way to find out is to hire a certified botanist and to have the work of that botanist reviewed by the Conservation Commission. That's a process that costs thousands of dollars. And I'm sure that not every homeowner in Falmouth with a puddle in their yard does that. And as a result, those who are singled out for enforcement are singled out arbitrarily, and that's not fair. Point 3, the amendment would overrule an inconsistency in the Falmouth wetland regulations. There are 2 types of isolated wetlands under the regulations. They're considered important to the same resource area values. One has a minimum size, one doesn't. And so as a result, an area that fills up with like only 4,000 cubic feet of water is not considered significant to flood control, but a little patch of lawn that gets kind of moist is. Doesn't make sense. Point number 4, the amendment would ensure proportionality with the buffer zone. So it would, as you saw in the diagram of my property, the minimum size for a buffer zone is pretty large, about 3/4 of an acre. The amendment would just make it the case that you have to have an area of some size to trigger that much larger area of regulation. Point 5, the amendment would prevent the waste of landowners' resources. It's very expensive to get a project approved by the Conservation Commission, even a straightforward landscaping project. Once you've hired your wetland scientist, once you've hired your engineer, if legal issues come up, your lawyer, you can easily spend tens of thousands of dollars for a very straightforward project. That's a waste of money to protect puddles. Point 6, the amendment would protect property values in Falmouth. When a puddle can cause really serious issues with your property, that could be an issue if you're going to try to sell your house and somebody knows that there's a puddle there, knows that the use of the property can be severely restricted. So it shouldn't be an issue for homeowners who need to sell their homes that puddles are regulated. So that's a brief summary of the points in favor of the amendment. What it really comes down to is a question of choosing the right priorities. We should be putting our resources toward protecting real wetlands, not puddles.
Perfect timing. Thank you very much. Any questions from the board?
All good, thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay. Next, we have Grant Walker for petitioner's article number 18.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Grant Walker, 71 Philadelphia Street, precinct number 3. So with Article 18, we are asking the town to adopt the Massachusetts Stretch Energy Code. This adoption of this code would be a choice for the town. It's not mandated. If the town wants to achieve or promote superior energy efficiency. And so if adopted, it would then replace the base energy code and become the required energy code in our town. Builders would then have 3 options. They would still have choice as to what they did to comply with the Stretch Energy Code. They could follow the Home Energy Rating System, HERS path. They could follow the Energy Star version 3.1 path, or they could follow the Passive House certification path. And inside each of those paths, the builder has choices or options as to how to achieve the energy efficiency goal. The whole point of the stretch code is to promote and to focus on the total performance of a house or other building as a system, rather than focusing on, you must put this in, or you must put that in, you must have A, B, or C. It's a single look, you might say, at the whole building and what its total energy efficiency is. The stretch code applies only to new construction, and today, given the changes of several years ago, there's really not a great deal of difference between the stretch energy code and the base code. For example, there are no differences in what is required for sealing the building envelope, for ventilation, for insulation, or for lighting. In the base code, as well as the stretch code, a blower door test is required, a whole house ventilation test is required, and a duct leakage test is required. No difference. Builders, well, yeah, most builders are already familiar with the stretch energy code. Some local builders, as we know from what they said in the April 2018 town meeting, have already built houses in accordance with, compliant with this stretch code. 273 municipalities in Massachusetts have already adopted the stretch code. 10 of them on Cape Cod, Mashpee, Yarmouth, Dennis, Brewster, Harwich, Chatham, Orleans, Wellfleet, Truro, and Provincetown. 4 of the 8 towns on Martha's Vineyard have adopted it. Nantucket has adopted it. So adoption of the stretch code would help to bring uniformity of code for builders who build in more than one town here on Cape Cod and nearby. The stretch energy code also promotes affordability in a number of ways. Most of the estimates that are provided by the Department of Energy Resources and particular towns show that the cost over base code construction is minimal compared to the total cost of new construction. And those additional costs can be part of the mortgage, and substantial rebates are available. They begin immediately. They reduce operating costs, as it then costs the owner, the renter, less to live in or to work in the structure for bills on heating and lighting and cooling and ventilation and so on, appliances. Those savings continue year after year. The stretch energy code, of course, promotes reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. Therefore, adoption of the stretch code is consistent with the Falmouth Local Comprehensive Plan. It is also consistent with Falmouth's Climate Protection Action Plan. And I think we can suggest that it is consistent with the preference of millennials and young people to live in a community that is taking positive action regarding climate disruption. Finally, of course, as we know, adoption of the stretch code is one of the requirements for designation as a green community. And that designation would bring grants to Falmouth for upgrades to heating, cooling, ventilation, insulation, storm windows, electric vehicle charging stations, and even grants, part of the grants would help with the administrative cost for the grants. That would mean year after year of savings on utility bills in municipal buildings, operations, and in the schools. So, Article 18 is calling for adoption of the stretch energy code. Thank you.
Also good timing. Thank you very much, Grant. Thank you. Any questions? Great, thank you. Next, we have Petitioner's Article 20, presented by Gerald Lynch. Come on up. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Board of Selectmen. My name is Edward Kirk. I'm an attorney with an office in Osterville. I'm here on behalf of Jerry Lynch, who's the named petitioner, and the Lawrence Lynch Realty Corporation, which is the owner of the parcel of land that's the subject of the town meeting article. I am somewhat technologically challenged, and so Mr. Vaught is here, and he's going to assist with just a few slides. But I have, before he has to do his thing, I'll just sort of give you off of these.
Thank you.
Those are the plans which will be referred to, just to give you an idea about where these parcels are.
They're not all one set.
Oh,
It's just one
Okay.
set, so if anybody wants to,
do you want to flip through the whole thing, pass them down?
so maybe we'll just, hold on 1 second.
But this is a petition article not coming from the planning board.
That is correct.
I'm a little confused why our planning department is involved in this then.
There's a story.
It's recommended by the planning board, although it's the petitioner's article.
I do that every time. Clockwise or counterclockwise?
Just keep going the same way.
I'm with you. And you said you were the technologically challenged one? And now you can scroll down, show your pictures, just use the down button.
All right.
Can't miss.
Thank you. Just a brief history in terms of how this article came to be before you. Lawrence Lynch Corporation is the owner of 69-acre parcel off Locust Field Road. For several decades, going back into the 50s, it's been the location of excavation, hauling, and storage of sand and gravel in connection with particularly Lawrence Lynch's road building business. It's now pretty much completely excavated, hollowed out as a bowl, some 30, 40 feet below the street level. And Lawrence Lynch was approached by Borrego Solar Systems because they thought this site would be a good location for a large-scale solar array. And they entered into a option for a lease agreement, long-term lease, with, between Lawrence Lynch and Borrego. The property was then part of the overlay district, which was recently adopted by the town, in which a large-scale solar array may be constructed there, provided site plan review permit is obtained from the planning board. During the course of preparing plans to present to the planning board, it was determined that the access that has been used for several decades to get to the pit is actually located, part of it is located on the adjacent parcel. And that was disclosed to the planning board. It was placed on the plan, and the planning board's, as far as the planning board was concerned, that access would be appropriate and approvable. But they did put in a condition in their decision which took note of this particular situation, stating that the applicant may continue to utilize the constructed access road it has previously used, as shown on the approved site plan, until such time as the Board of Selectmen recommends and town meeting votes to grant the applicant a permanent easement to use the constructed access road for this purpose. It is expected the easement will be presented to the November 2019 town meeting for action. In the event of unfavorable town meeting action, this condition must be revised. The town-owned land was once owned by the Fred Lawrence, then it was owned by the Moniz brothers, then it was owned by Donald and Diane Fleischer, and in 1997, the town took it for unpaid taxes. So it's a piece of vacant land of about 11 acres. And what we're asking the town, this board to do, is to recommend this adoption of this article to the town meeting. What the article would do was, in fact, turn around and give you, if it's adopted, give you the authority to grant the easement on behalf of the town. It doesn't require that you do it, so it comes back to you. And the article states that it would be on such terms and conditions as the Board of Selectmen would require. So what we're looking for is for you to recommend that the town meeting give you the authority to give Lawrence Lynch an easement over this particular property. The first 200 feet of the road are going to be brought up to subdivision standards, and of course, it would be available for use by the town because it's a non-exclusive easement.
Thank you, Attorney Kirk. I just open up for any questions if.
So I have a quick question.
Sue and then Doug.
With respect to, what's the reason that there simply isn't another access road carved out of the property that's already owned?
This is the one that's been used for all this period of time. Another easement or another access road could be created. There'd be some expense involved. I understand it would involve a curb cut and so forth. But for the time being,
So it's convenience and money saving.
it would save the applicant and whoever's responsible for creating the access. It would save them some money,
Is
that's
there a
correct.
municipal benefit to the project? Is the town getting some of the solar energy?
The town is, for the project, the town is going to be receiving a substantial amount of money by way of taxes, personal
Thank you.
property taxes, with the all these solar panels that are going to be quite extensive are going to be deemed personal property and taxed by the town. I think that Borrego has been in some contact with the town discussing what the numbers are going to be. I think there's going to be what they call pilot payments in lieu of
Right, you've
taxes.
answered my question, thank
Yep.
you.
Okay.
Thank you. Doug, and then Tom, you can.
So, as I see the diagram, Lot 1, Parcel 2, and Parcel 3 are currently town-owned property, is that correct?
That is correct. That was
And the property above that is not town-owned property?
and the property above that is the Lynch property.
So the only place the easement really is on Lot 1, is that correct? Even though the highlighted is...
Yeah, that particular plan shows in yellow the lower part of the easement.
Because the yellow part highlighted, it looks like it was on Lynch property.
Tom, do you know how to pivot this one so I can?
If I may, cut to what I consider the money shot, if that's all right.
Down at the bottom, yeah.
So this is the site plan that the planning board approved for the property. So at this site right here is where Borrego's entrance has been to the project right along on town-owned property. Now, when the town adopted the solar overlay district, one of the things they wanted to do was to try to make solar panels compatible with the town while maintaining the streetscape that we see in town. So there are extensive buffers that are required under the solar overlay district, including a 100-foot setback from the
I
street
guess I'm
undisturbed.
going to have to interrupt. I'm really uncomfortable with this petitioner's article being presented by our planning board or by our town planner. I don't understand whether this is a petitioner's article, then we should just hear his presentation, and the rest of it can come up at town meeting. But why is this getting a different support than any other petition article? I just, if it really is coming from the planning board, it should have come from the planning board as their recommendation, not from the petitioner's article. And I'm still not, it makes me feel very uncomfortable to have town employees supporting the petitioner's article in this way.
Any other thoughts from the board? I mean, I understand, trying to clarify it, but I think that Selectman Jones raises a good point and just said, I understand this has some history to it, but in general, the petitioners, there's one presenter for each article, and we've kind of been strict. I know some other groups have asked for sort of extra people to petition, to explain articles. So, I think this board gets the gist of what's being requested and the benefit as outlined by Attorney Kirk for the municipality. And I assume that the planning board or town planner will speak to this issue at town meeting.
Right.
So I think,
I'd be happy to whenever you'd like me to.
okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Oh, no, I think that's helpful. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Article 21, who I think is Sandy here? Yep, Sandy Bayman Silva is gonna present on this article.
Welcome.
Don't give me one, because I have, you know I have them, so.
Thank you.
Save time.
One thing I would request is that you get a smaller podium for people who are vertically challenged. I feel overwhelmed. All right.
Not true, you've never been overwhelmed, Sandy, so don't try and give us that.
By the podium. All right, good evening. Thank you very much to the Board of Selectmen for hearing my request this evening. My name is Sandy Feynman Silva. I'm from Precinct 2. I live at 50 Davis Road. And this is a warrant article for Falmouth Town Meeting. The title of the article is to protect the civil rights and safety of all Falmouth residents. And essentially, this article is drawn from the message from the police chief, Chief Dunn, regarding the DHS ICE Secure Communities Program. And this particular article has emerged out of the crisis that we're seeing in our own country here today. Hostility toward immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers, and many other residents and visitors, including African Americans, Latinas, persons of color generally, LGBTQ individuals, religious groups, particularly Jews and Muslims, that has brought and increased levels of hostility and violence toward members of these groups. So this warrant article, essentially what it does is it cites data from the police chief's message to our community, where he mentions, for example, that the role of the police in the town of Falmouth is to protect the public that we serve by enforcing existing state laws in a fair and impartial manner to our entire community. So this is on the page 2 of the, or the first page of the brochure. Another point that is made in this particular message from the police chief, that they will protect the public that we serve by, it also draws from the mission, core values, and vision statement that is on our Town of Falmouth website, saying that the police will provide professional police service to all Falmouth residents and visitors without while respecting individual rights and human dignity. Another component of the police chief's message to the community is that local law enforcement agencies, including the Falmouth Police, have no authority to enforce federal immigration laws. Ours is a town police force, and the police are empowered to deal with and adjudicate town policing matters. A third point that is made in the police chief's message is that race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, age, occupation, immigration status, or any other arbitrary characteristic pertaining to any specific individual will have absolutely no bearing on any decision for a Falmouth police officer to effect an arrest. And then the article mentions that we will not discriminate against members of our community for any personal or individual characteristics that individuals possess. We're asking town meeting to affirm and endorse these statements and thereby affirm the values and codes of conduct that underpin them. The town funds and resources will not be used to enforce federal laws except as required by law. That profiling based on artificial individual characteristics that I've mentioned, race, ethnic origin, individual ability, age, gender, etc., will not be tolerated. So racial profiling and other forms of profiling will not be tolerated, which is also included in the chief's message. Individual civil liberties or human rights will not be infringed upon, and due process rights will be honored. All of these provisions are already in force among members of the Falmouth Police Department, and the 105 signers, plus me, 106, of this citizens petition article are asking that our community as a whole affirm that we stand with Chief Dunn and the Falmouth Police Department, who have taken an oath to apply provisions of the law fairly and equitably to all residents and visitors. 8 other Cape Cod towns have endorsed similar resolutions, including Provincetown, Truro, Wellfleet, Eastham, Brewster, Harwich, Dennis, and Mashpee. Orleans also passed a civil liberties protection resolution back in 2003. All 6 Martha's Vineyard towns have also passed similar resolutions.
Thank you,
So
Sandy.
we're asking for your endorsement.
Thank you very much. Any questions from this board? I think it's a pretty thoroughly written article. Great, no, thank you very much. Okay, we have Article 22. Petitioner here. And, no, come on up. I think that you had asked to, for there to be 2 people to kind of give the presentation.
Right, I'm going to give the presentation. If there's any other questions or comments or assistance, that could be.
Great, perfect, wonderful. Welcome, introduce yourself.
All right. Thank you for inviting me to speak with you tonight. My name is Christine Kierkegaard, and Scott Garvin in the blue shirt over there, and I represent Falmouth for Sustainable Practices, which is a Cape-wide environmental advocacy organization with representatives in every town. With me tonight is also Madhavi Venkatasan from Brewster and Mary Cote from Sandwich.
Welcome.
In 2019, we initiated a municipal plastic bottle ban campaign on the Cape. As of now, the ban has been adopted by 6 towns, and we are currently pursuing the remaining towns that comprise Barnstable County. And here's a quick photo of some of the other organization members representing the other towns on the Cape. Without doubt, plastic bottles are very convenient, and that's why they're everywhere. But I'd like to argue that their adverse effects on human health and the environment greatly outweigh their momentary convenience. Since plastic bottles are a byproduct of the fossil fuel industry, their production contributes to greenhouse gases. And there are 50 billion plastic bottles consumed every year, with about 30 billion in the United States. That's 4.5% of the world's population consuming 60% of the bottles. And most of that is from the sale and distribution of water. There are about 1,500 single-use plastic water bottles consumed per second in the United States, and as a world leader, we need to acknowledge and be accountable for the consequences of our consumer-based or our consumer-driven behaviors. Plastic is also a health issue, as chemicals such as BPAs and phthalates can leach out of plastic bottles and into our beverages that we consume, and our bodies were never made to ingest oil-based byproducts. One way plastic bottles are disposed of is incineration, which releases toxic chemicals into the air we breathe and the rain that falls in our waterways and our crops. Plastic bottles discarded into landfills contaminate groundwater, and those that never make it to the trash bin can harm our oceans, beaches, roadways, and wildlife. It's estimated that a plastic bottle can take up to 500 years to photodegrade, which is not the same as biodegrade, and that distinction is important because this means plastics will never go away. Recycling is of little help because recycled plastics need virgin or new plastic to bond to, and less than 1/3 of plastic bottles will be recycled. Fundamentally, recycling does not reduce the need for more plastic creation, and recycled bottles are not made into new bottles. Instead, they may end up as clothing, carpet, or deck material. And here's a quick graph cycle, life cycle of a plastic bottle, and I just want to note that the green arrow, how it shows recycled plastic, simply ends up as another product and never re-enters circulation. Our municipal bottle ban initiatives are focused on promoting municipal policy that addresses single-use plastic by eliminating the purchase of single-use plastic bottled beverages by towns and prohibiting the sale of beverages in single-use plastic containers on town property. We are actively engaged with many towns to promote behavioral changes in favor of reusables and alternatives to plastic when needed. There is an exemption from this bylaw for any town department when engaged in public health and safety operations. The rationale for our ban rests on the assumption that the government is established to protect the welfare of its people it governs. Just this past weekend, 350 Cape Cod held 2 days of climate strikes in Falmouth, showing residents how they can hold their government accountable by encouraging their representatives to support climate legislation. And in turn, we are asking for that same support from our local government because plastic impacts climate change. And Falmouth, as I heard also tonight, is working already really hard when it comes to environmental stewardship. We have the Falmouth Water Stewards with their installing water refill stations. The Falmouth Litter Reduction Team has successfully championed the styrofoam ban. You mentioned earlier, Compost With Me is encouraging businesses to use compostables and food waste, composting food waste. And just recently, we had the Wequot Congregational Church creating a co-op that allows residents to purchase organic food in bulk while reducing single-use plastic while food shopping. So, you know, this is Cape Cod. We're a destination for many visitors because of our environment, and this is just another step to keep pushing forward and being responsible for our environmental impacts as we consume.
Great. Thank you very much. Mr. Johnson?
I just want to clarify, as I read the article, it is outlining the town from buying plastic bottles or them to be sold on town-owned property. It has nothing to do with private industry, private businesses. It's just what the town does.
If the event was on a town property, it would also include. So
Right, but if it's on town property-
No sale on town property.
But it would have nothing to do with what Stop and Shop does.
Correct.
Right.
So it's actually, okay.
Unless they were doing something on town property.
Right.
Good.
Yep, no, I think that's a great clarification. I thank you for asking that question. That's a question that a lot of folks have asked from me, so that's great to hear that. Any other questions about this article? Great presentation, thank you very much. Okay, and we have our final presentation, Ahmed Mustafa, Article 23. Coming up, and it looks like also Mr. Wilson, are you passing some stuff out? Great, thank you. Oh, of course, yeah. Mosquito in here. Thank you. Sorry.
Can we get tested?
Triple.
Quite all right, not a problem.
That's okay, I have extra. I just saved your life.
I appreciate that.
Welcome.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Select Board. I'm going to make this very fast because the hour is getting late, and I'm tired. I've been up since 5:30. Had to go to Boston and back, so it's been a busy day. But anyways, I'd like to first of all thank Falmouth Community Television for allowing the VFW members to utilize their facility for the past few years because we don't have a home. What I'm asking is for your support in this article and let us become the managers of your old senior center and make that a Falmouth Veteran Service Center. The procedure would be, if you would agree on it, the Veterans of Foreign War Post 2569, which I'm the commander of, would be the manager of that property. Of course, the property always will belong to the town of Falmouth. And with us, there are other agencies that would also like to use the property for their meetings and so on. And if we could get that, I think we could have something really going here. It would help out everybody. And that's basically it. I'm just looking for your okay on it.
Great, thank you. Mr. Wilson?
My name is Alan Wilson. I'm with Mr. Mustafa in the planning for the Joe Q Veterans Coffee Break. I'm a disabled veteran, Vietnam. And what we have in front of you is a bold new approach for veterans in the town of Falmouth. And we have been working very diligently over the course of the last 3 months to build a coalition of people who care about veterans. So we have people here in our audience that are key members of our coalition. Kathleen Jasperson, who is the president of Falmouth Together We Can, and Bobby Riches, who is the executive director of Falmouth Housing Authority. They are a collaborating partner. We are connecting with veteran organizations throughout the town and putting them under one umbrella. And the umbrella is to use their expertise to bring veterans together under the umbrella of the Falmouth VFW and the Joe Q Veterans Coffee Break. Now, this is very unprecedented for veterans groups. For years, they've been very much of a silo and very much of an organization that worked on their own behalf. So Falmouth has got a chance to do something bold, great, and at the end of the day, will have a tremendous impact on the lives of veterans, family members, and their friends. This coalition will be sustainable, all right, and transparent, all right? And it's being designed, we work with Falmouth Together We Can, primarily because they've got a 22-year history of helping many nonprofits in the town of Falmouth. And they are excellent in transparency. And as most of you know, and I hope you all have supported Falmouth Together We Can. All of this is put together with an idea that we want to help veterans. We're going to work in coordination with the Veterans Town Council, Councilor Don Lincoln. But this is an effort to bring veterans together in one location, the location being the John Mello Building. All right, once the senior center moves into the new location, all right, we would then move in, and we know there's permitting issues, we know there's some construction issues. We've already done due diligence of that, and we feel strongly that we'll be able to address them and be properly permitted. This building and the programs in the building will be self-sufficient. We already have done a significant amount of fundraising, and we feel that we can keep the building operating and self-sufficient financially from different sources, including the members of the board who have already made contributions and other members in the community who, once they've heard about this, have come forward to make donations to help us. So the key here is that we want to build fellowship and bring people together. We want to be able to have a resource for veterans to go to get information. As a veteran, I can tell you, and there's maybe some veterans in the community or in this room, that the VA right now is in the midst of constant change. You have to have unbelievable resources to stay on top of how a veteran receives a benefit, how a widow gets any kind of compensation for a death benefit. There needs to be a conduit where these people can come and find out about this. And the only way for them to do it is have a home, to have a place to go to. All right, and they do it because they trust it. I'm close to the end, I think, Megan.
A little over.
All right, thank you.
So I'll just open it up if there are any questions from the board.
I just have one
Yep.
question. Is the idea that this would follow the way other leases for town property are in town?
Yeah, it's the
This
same.
organization would then take responsibility for maintenance and upkeep of the building?
Absolutely,
Okay, thank you.
absolutely.
Any other questions?
Everyone's familiar with Article 23, correct?
Yeah.
What it says and what it
Yes.
is?
23.
A lease for 5 years for $1.
Yep.
Actually, the town makes money there.
Mr. Walker? On this?
It's not-
No, so this is, it's not, we'll have another time where we decide whether or not the board is going to vote in favor of it.
Well, not on this, well, it's on the article that I recommended. I forgot that something I was supposed to give the board.
Well, you can just give it to us.
Okay.
You can just give it to us, we'll take that. And if I can just give a quick plug, I see from your flyer that there is, thank you. On October 2nd, 2019, at Atria at 9:30 a.m. Is the next Joe Q Veterans Coffee Break, and your guest is going to be Tricia Favuli, who is the Director of Assessing, so folks should feel free to stop by and attend. All right, thank you. And thank you, Grant. I think everybody take, let's see. Come on and pass it on.
We
Okay.
received this already.
Excellent. Thank you for everyone who presented tonight, and thank you for sticking to the timeline. Everyone was very good. All right, next, we're going to return back to the review of the email, the Town of Falmouth email policy for public bodies, and then this is just a draft for discussion only, so. Mr. Johnson-Staub.
While he's setting up, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Peter, was this prepared by town council?
It was prepared in conjunction with town council, yes.
I have
Okay.
a copy for you. I think you have that, okay. Sam, do you have
Sam,
one of these?
do you have one
We
that
got one
has
tonight that it had
page
page
two?
2. I think our packets for some reason
Yeah,
didn't
we
have
just-
page 2.
The scan was mixed,
Well, I just
missed the
passed
backside.
or
I did.
There you go.
I do not.
Maybe.
Special ones are complete.
Okay.
So, thank you, Peter Johnson, Staff Assistant Town Manager. The policy that we are presenting to you in draft form tonight for discussion was researched by Greg Banwarth, our IT Director, and then reviewed with the Town Manager, Town Council, Finance Director, and myself. You have the full policy in front of you. I'm not going to read the policy, just want to highlight some of the main points and start by sort of describing the challenges that we're looking to address with this policy, because as the board is well aware, and most of our committee members hopefully are aware as well, we have these conflicting goals and legal requirements. We want to facilitate communication, we want to engage the community, but we are severely limited in that endeavor by the open meeting law. And that frequently, those conflicting goals come into play with email, and specifically, committee members cannot email one another anything that's substantively related to the committee's work. They can't even, one member can't even really express an opinion about a matter that's coming before the board to a quorum of the members of that committee, board, or commission. So we spoke to a lot of other, I say we, the IT Director, conferred with a number of other communities and looked at how they're addressing these challenges, and they're struggling as much as we are. Many of them just don't issue town email addresses to boards and committees outside of the Board of Selectmen, and some of them provide emails to committee chairs only, and that's the direction that we are looking to, that we're proposing to the board, is to issue one email address to the committee chair or the chair's designee, and only the committee chair would be able to respond to email using that email address. So some of the points we want to highlight again is no deliberation, so we can't use email, whether it's a town official email address or personal email addresses, it doesn't matter. We can't have committee members, a quorum of committees, exchanging ideas via email. It is, however, there is an exception for emailing among a quorum of committee members for purely administrative scheduling meetings and that type of thing. But that's a very limited exception. So one of the new twists that we came up with, how do we facilitate community members emailing the committees so that the committees can receive the email without facilitating and creating that temptation that the committee members are going to respond to it, copy all their fellow members, and then run afoul of the open meeting law. What we're proposing is that, again, the email would go to the one committee chair, and we can set up either manually or in an automated fashion, where IT is still looking into whether they can fully automate this, but certainly manually. The chair can forward that email received from a committee member, can blast it out to all of the members of that committee. That email that comes from someone who is not a member of the committee, right, comes from a member of the public, can be blasted out to the personal email addresses of the committee, but we want to establish a policy that that's done by a BCC. And that way, when the individual committee members receive it and they're tempted to hit that reply all and chime in, that email is going to go to the board chair only. It's not going to get blasted out to all of the members and then violate the open meeting law.
Questions
Yeah,
along the-
go ahead.
Peter, if you don't mind, questions along
Yeah.
the way. The issue, couple of issues that I see with this. First of all, it's hard enough to get volunteers, let alone chairs. A lot of people are just gonna be like run from being chairs because this is a whole nother burden. The second issue I see is it really creates a serial breach of the open meeting law because it permits and encourages all of these folks to email Megan. And so therefore, you end up having sort of a serial conversation about potentially a subject that's coming before the board. So that's just a couple of tweaks since you're looking for comments.
I guess I would say I'm less concerned about the serial part, because I think if that's gonna happen,
Well, if you're
I
not
think it's
blind
gonna-
copied, you'd be aware. Oh, I don't know, go ahead.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt.
I hear
It's-
what you're saying,
it's a
except
tough
that I think
problem.
it's a two-prong, is we have to keep pointing out, people cannot deliberate. I mean, it doesn't, you're correct. I mean, it doesn't, it's just as problematic, and I think people don't understand this, but we've had this, incident where committees, people well-intentioned or organizations try to make an appointment with Mr. Jones and with me and with you, and to have the same conversation. That's a problem as well. It doesn't even have to be through, it's, outside of the scope of email, or they could do it through email, but that's also a problem. We can't keep, sometimes they want to get a weigh-in.
But we can listen, we can't talk.
Yes, we can't, so in other words, I think that the deliberation piece is just sort of an ongoing educational component. I agree. I mean, this system won't automatically prevent that from happening, right?
But the response of the chair to a inappropriate BCC reply will cut that down, saying, hey, Doug, you can't respond that way. I can't, any response that I give to Megan when she forwards it, most responses would be inappropriate, and the chair would then say, that's deliberation. Save that for the meeting.
And it maybe just saves the situation that I think keeps coming up, which is that the violation has happened by the time the chair, everybody is on the copy.
Right.
And somebody inadvertently has a whole conversation that they send to everyone, that violation has happened, right? And by the time the chair responds back, the violation has happened, where maybe not necessarily in the scenario that Doug's saying, I see what you're saying.
It would
It's not a
simply be
perfect.
better and easier to continue training about open meeting law and to tell, like a lot of times, we all know it, but Megan, I think, is particularly good about saying, this isn't for deliberation, please don't reply, and then making an announcement or whatever the subject is. That way, that, it's not too much of a burden on the chair, everybody on the committee, and I'm of course, more speaking to other committees. So that's just another thought.
Sure. If I may, so, by no means do we think that we have a perfect policy that's going to prevent all violation of the open meeting law. If anything, it's attempting to strike a balance by, again, facilitating that communication with the public and putting in a policy what should already be reinforcing the training and the law that has already been received by every committee member. So there's no substitute for the training and the ongoing reminders and education about the open meeting law violations. This policy doesn't, absolutely prevent anything. I think it makes it a little bit less likely by creating some systems and some guidelines for how folks are going to use email, but certainly we welcome any suggestions you may have as to making it better, or if the board really does not want to issue an email, an official email address to each committee chair. Again, many communities have chosen that path, and we can certainly choose that as well.
What I like about this, let me speak to that part. I think it's really hard as a constituent to try and find out. Sometimes you go to the website. I mean, a selectman and I know the people individually. I try to sometimes go to contact somebody and I can't find a way to contact them, other than, you know, a phone that actually just goes to sort of maybe, if it's planning, it might go to the planning, you know, it might go to Tom Bott's office. I'm not trying to talk to Tom, I'm trying to talk to somebody on the planning board, or to the planning board. So I do like the idea of having one address for a committee. You know, so I see solid waste here, but, you know, solid waste advisory, and it's just really solid waste advisory, and it's always the same. I mean, I wouldn't want it to, it's
Right.
just always the same.
Right.
The person who has access changes because it's Linda now, or her designee, and it's somebody else when they become chair. But there's always one address to contact, so that somebody, when they wanna talk to a committee about something, they know right where to go, and it doesn't create it's not changing all the time. If we're giving an individual address, that person changes the committee, we're altering that. It's number one, it's a lot of work, I think, to constantly change that. It's also, you know, a little bit disruptive for constituents and residents. I think it's a great idea to have one, very user-friendly, it's the name of the committee.
Exactly.
And that's how people can reach out, and they can do it from the website. I love that. I think that's the best part. I agree, I think we're trying with the open meeting law piece. I think you try everything you can, but I think the best piece of this is to give people one point of contact that is really clear, because it's not right now, and I think it can be very frustrating. I've experienced the frustration, so I can imagine people who are trying to get some information, can get very frustrated as to who they talk to with a particular committee or.
Right.
So anyway, that's just, keep
So,
going.
so right now, you know, right now what we have is, you know, when agenda packets go out, when meetings are being scheduled, any communication now that happens via email, it's personal email addresses, but it's all in the two-line. So we do get a lot of inadvertent violations. You know, so I'm suggesting, you know, if we just get our staff, you know, it's primarily the staff, frankly, that are blasting emails out to all of the committee members. If we establish a policy that says, you know, whether you're staff or committee chair or whoever, if you're blasting something out to the committee, to the personal email addresses, it goes in BCC. It's just one extra step to make it a little bit harder to violate the open meeting law. Not a cure-all, but maybe it'll help a little.
I think that has to be balanced with, if we simply did what I think we should be doing, which is all people on staff put their email on the website. If somebody needs, you know, anyone, a town manager, it's on the website. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to the website, people's email addresses are not there or are not. That's just a task that should be performed. And it's the same thing with committee members. If if there's a particular member of a committee you want to communicate with, anyone and any taxpayer, they should be able to directly contact them. I think the idea of burdening chairs with having a whole new job of not only learning this and fielding all of the substance and trying to figure out how to deal with it for their committee is a burden. And now on top of that burden, we're gonna ask them to, just to get an email from someone, you have to make time in your day to go on the town website and to go get your committee emails. It's just an added job for the committee chair, as opposed to Bing, it's on your phone, no thank you, I'll forward it, I'll ask the town manager. That's a sort of both sides of the equation.
So you're suggesting posting personal email addresses for all of the committee members on the website?
Any email address, for example, whatever Linda wants to be contacted at, as opposed to.
But not just the chair, all the members?
Anyone who, it's staff definitely, and anybody who's on a committee that wants to be accessible.
So one of the concerns that raises is the public records law.
Which they are already trained in because they're committee members and they're coming to get the training, in which case they may want to have a separate email like we do.
Right, but if we are encouraging official communication to personal email addresses, then a public records request comes in and the town staff it's going to be much more difficult for town staff to assist in retrieving those records. Then really going to be left to the individual volunteer to say, sorry, we have this public records request that goes back, 2 years, so we need you to sort through your personal email address to respond to this public records request,
And that's what they do now.
as opposed to saying to committee members, do not use your personal email.
The town could have a requirement that you have a dedicated Falmouth committee email.
I guess
I have
with-
about 6 of them. Every committee I'm on, I have a separate email.
I guess with that, my only concern would just be, sometimes that turnover is, with all those committees, sort of people coming off, people coming on, just, it creates a little bit more work for,
The secretary
to
just
take them off and put 'em
on
on,
off
so.
writes the thank you note, changes the email, whoever's doing the administration.
Mhm. I'm just taking a look at your, is this your last?
Yeah,
one?
that's it.
Okay, I just didn't, this one is,
So the last slide was just a sort of a detail point about if an individual committee member wants to, just an example, committee member wants to say, hey, I was talking to someone on the street, or I got an email from someone and I want to add this to the agenda, that email should, be from that member to the chair, not to the whole board. And it's just a sort of a detail point on, is that housekeeping, agenda setting, or is that deliberating? Those lines can get really blurry. So the suggestion would be just email the chair only.
so I think a great next step would be to take this that you've put together and send it to our committees and ask them to put it on their agendas for some feedback.
Sure.
Because I think if we're asking what's best for volunteers, I'd like to hear from, which are mostly volunteers, I'd like to hear from the volunteers, not tonight, Alan, but yeah. Because I know this has been something, I've seen your emails about, this issue. So I think it would be nice to get some feedback.
Sure.
From the committees that this board can look at around, exactly these issues. Because, it's sort of that two-pronged piece. It's the violation, and then it's the, really constituent services, communication facility, really making that facility of communication easier for everyone. So I think that would be my recommendations, to get some feedback from the committees on this draft proposal.
Great.
If that sounds good
With
to
a
folks.
time deadline so we can reschedule it.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
great. Thank you very much. Thanks for putting that together. Okay,
Madam Chair, we have one
yes.
additional item.
Yep.
Under that header.
Oh, yes,
For access control
yes.
protocol, I'd given selectmen in your packet have basically one paragraph summary, town hall access control and security. I don't know if members should have a copy of that in your packet.
We do.
I do.
Yep.
Yep.
And if I may just briefly go through it for those listening. As we've discussed in the past, the town has been working to update and modernize the town hall security and access control system. We're nearing completion of this process, and we'll be preparing for an anticipated implementation cutover in the month of October. The access security system will include a fully automated locking and unlocking system for town hall to facilitate access during all times of normal town hall operation. Primary routine employee and visitor access will therefore not require the utilization of keys. For appropriate security purposes, a limited number of persons will be issued digital key cards, which will allow after-hours access. Given the age of town hall and past utilization of keys, we will need to rekey the manual locks. We will give careful consideration to ensure that those who must access the building outside of regular business operating hours are afforded access, but there may be some persons who may be temporarily inconvenienced during this coming transition process. And finally, video security on town hall. Ingress and egress points is also part of this overall system, and this will include only the access doors to town hall and will not include internal areas of the building. That's something we've been talking about, and again, looking for an anticipated cutover in the coming month.
Any questions about that?
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, we now have appointment of Board of Selectmen Subcommittee on Proposed Municipal Broadband. So, as we know, there is a study going forward to look at the feasibility and sort of the various ways that municipal broadband, could be structured if the town were to go in that direction. And we thought, there were a few of us that met this week. I was the only member of the Board of Selectmen. Just to be clear, there wasn't any open meeting law violations since we're talking about that. But we met with Julian and Peter, Jennifer, and some members of the groups of folks who are trying to push forward the study, and also Mike from EDIC, to really just talk about how the study is going forward, and just kind of, hash out some of the potential challenges and things to think about along the lines of this proposed project. So after that, we had a request by EDIC that the town be involved, which was wonderful in the sense that, with this survey, make sure that we understand what's being asked. Certainly staff is going to be interviewed. And so just to be very careful, my thought was we really should probably have a subcommittee, because if you are on EDIC,
Right.
so you're going to be at many of these meetings, or at least involved in the process.
Exactly.
And so if another select person is weighing in regularly, that really does fall within, in attending any of these meetings, it does really fall within that subcommittee definition. So we didn't want there to be, again, any impropriety with that. So we don't anticipate that I or any other member that might be on the subcommittee will be regularly attending every meeting, but we're not sure how it will play out. We just want to make sure that we're clear with that. So we need a subcommittee. My proposal is that obviously Sue would be one member of that subcommittee, because she will already be there for EDIC purposes. And then we would need another individual. I know Selectman Brown had expressed interest. I'm also happy to do it, so it really just depends on how this, or anyone else on this board is interested.
Does this suggest that we are in support?
No, I don't think it does. I mean, my perspective is that the project, we know we're gonna be getting the results of this, this survey, and we know that it's going to kind of play out over the coming months in terms of some updates, and that the town will be involved in part of that, in the sense that they are gonna be speaking to staff, and we just wanted to make sure that that it was done well, that we understood the way, frankly, that the survey was being structured, some of the questions that were being asked. We wanna make sure that, at the end of the day, whatever comes out of that is a real value to the town making a decision. So I don't think it in any way suggests that we support it. We don't have enough information, I think, to make a decision in any way. But
That's how I feel.
And in addition to the survey, the funds, and Sue can probably speak to it better than I, but the funding that the EDIC provided, I believe, is for a feasibility study,
Right.
including
Right.
a survey.
Right,
Right.
yes, thank you. Yeah, it's broader than, so, I think the thought was just to be able to, if there are things that come along the way, if there is town weigh-in that's needed, if another member of the board is regularly weighing in on that, we just, again, wanted to make sure that we covered our bases. So I'm happy to do whatever the board wants to do. If the board doesn't feel we need a subcommittee, and we just wanna and Sue can report back to us in that kind of dual capacity, it's really up to the board's pleasure.
I prefer having a subcommittee just by virtue of availability and different viewpoint. This is something that I've been involved in from day one. A lot of the, I know Sam has been interested for a long time, and I think it's helpful just to have a different viewpoint. So I'm for the committee idea. I'm happy to serve as one of the members.
Okay. Anyone else have any, Sam, any?
No, I think it's any liaison, method of communication with us and what's going on either at the EDIC or this advocacy group is valuable.
I'm not sure I understand the charge of this subcommittee.
So I think the charge would be in that kind of liaison capacity. They're not making a decision, but they're participating to the extent that it is required, so that the town feels that that feasibility study sort of represents or takes into account the many different, we raised a lot of different thoughts and concerns at that meeting. And I think, to be honest, I think some of them, the group of folks working on this are incredibly, in touch with a lot of the issues. But I think there were some that maybe were brought to the table by town staff that weren't totally on their radar. So the goal is to have that feasibility study really make sure that it's fully fleshed out.
So this would be just a two-person subcommittee that would have meetings about this, or are we just saying these would, two of us would be liaisons to the group that's come, the community group that's come forward for this?
I think you
just
could
don't-
call it liaison. I think the problem is my understanding is just that when two selectmen are regularly attending or weighing in, then it becomes a subcommittee and it's not
Right.
just a liaison.
Right.
Oh, so, okay.
And that, because
When
then you have
that
to
second
post it.
individual
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So
Changes.
I think that's my understanding is that's sort of the difference. Otherwise, we would just say these are two liaisons, but I
That's
think
where I
it's
was
the number.
I didn't understand that.
Is that, am I saying
Yeah, I
that
think,
correctly?
Megan, when the three of us discussed it, I think your concern was that, that there might be two of you regularly wanting to go to these meetings, and that could be a problem. So to Selectman Jones' question, is the subcommittee charged with making a recommendation to the board? I don't think that's what the initial idea was. It was just give two people the ability to participate as they wish and not run afoul of the open meeting law. Bearing in mind, this means, if the municipal broadband group says, hey, we have a meeting on October 20th, and the two of you want to go, that means we post the meeting and take minutes of the subcommittee meeting.
So, I mean, the other option, if we're trying to simplify, is to have you report back to us. And I guess if somebody else weighs in from time to time, that's not an issue. So, I don't know if we're making it more complicated than we need to, but.
I think the continuity is gonna be very important to have the, for the feasibility study and survey serve the town, since the proposal is municipal. It's not for, a private
Company or
broadband, so I think
But
this
that's
is,
still just feasibility of it. We're not actually doing a proposal.
right,
We're not proposing municipal broadband. We're doing a feasibility of that.
it's being included in a feasibility study.
Right.
It's not a non-municipal
So, but that means that
broadband feasibility study.
that means this group can't meet without us posting the agenda.
The subcommittee, right.
Subcommittee.
Or this, or, I mean, if they're gonna be going to the meetings of the community broadband group as subcommittee members, that group can't meet with them there unless we post it and take minutes.
Right.
I think that's
the
really
only
gonna
thing that
limit
makes
the,
it-
that's gonna really limit what they, I mean, if they want us there, or want somebody there, it's two of them, that's gonna limit what they can do quite a bit.
Not really.
I mean, I
Hasn't-
don't know, we didn't talk to them about this, so you may well be right. I think it would be a good conversation to have with them if that's gonna be limiting for them to not be able to, have private conversations outside of a public meeting. Again, they could meet, as long as the two subcommittee members
Aren't there.
aren't there, they can meet in private.
But that was the reason to have them, and I thought the whole idea was to have
Presumably, yeah.
selectmen there.
Or to weigh in, or to be part of the conversation.
Right.
I mean, I don't think it's time sensitive, so if we wanna sort of talk to those folks again, and
And it
to
wouldn't be a violation.
EDIC and just get their feeling on,
It wouldn't be a violation if Sue always went, and one of us randomly also went. That's
my-
not a problem.
That's my understanding.
It's just if it's the two same people over and over again.
Although,
Officially
if
appointed.
you
right.
went, and then Doug went, and then Sam went, I think then we have that serial open meeting law
Not if we're going to,
potential.
Yeah, but the formal rotation, I agree, yeah.
Right.
yeah, if it's a
Or-
regular
or-
rotation,
Random.
but I think if random, I don't think,
Still the same conversation.
Well, I
if
think
three of us showed up, it'd be a problem too, but.
To
Yeah.
Selectman Moran's point, I think if the substance is serially shared outside of a meeting, it's a problem. But if there's a meeting and then there's a report back at an open selectmen's meeting,
Right.
you're fine. Or if there are, different sort of subjects, as long as the same conversation sort of isn't serially
It seems like
brought
it
to
should just be
individual-
structured from the beginning. That's one of the reasons I think the chair was considering this. So maybe more communication is the,
yeah, I think so why don't we do this? Why don't we reach back out to sort of, Courtney and Peter and Art and get a sense of, and Mike from
Mhm.
EDIC and just get a sense as to whether or not they see that as a hindrance. I don't know what their meeting schedule is going to be like, if it's gonna be pretty frequent, they may feel, and if they call it at the last minute, I mean, at the same time, if they call something at the last minute, we just can't both go.
Right.
So, I think, again, the goal was to make sure that the town and the town's concerns and the concerns we hear
Were
from our
represented.
constituents are well represented
Mhm.
in this feasibility study and in the survey. And we felt that having a subcommittee was one way to make sure that happens. So we can return to it. Everybody good with that?
Yes.
Okay. We don't have to table it, we just put it on a future agenda, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
all right, great. Thanks for everybody's input on that.
I mean, I guess my other question would be, another way of going with it is if we actually appointed an ad hoc committee of the Board of Selectmen to look into, to oversee the whole project, and then we actually say, we believe in this and we're taking it on, I would feel much more comfortable having that vote. I'm not sure how I'd vote on doing that, but that would be really the way to get this to move forward. But right now, it is not something we have decided we are looking into.
Right.
It feels a little weird the ADIC is doing it when we haven't even, as a Board of Selectmen, decided we're interested. And they're putting money up for something that we haven't, it should have been something we would decide, this is where we're heading. And maybe we're
Well-
waiting to find out the information from the feasibility study before we decide that, but it feels a little bit backwards in my mind.
I think the way the process came about is just that there were some conversations by this group about, we need a feasibility study, really kicks it off. And frankly, EDIC was the first group to step up and say, we'll fund your feasibility study, which they can do in a way that we can't because we have to wait and go to town meeting. And they're pretty nimble and they said, yep, let's do it and get the ball rolling. And again, it's just the feasibility study. But I do think that, the last thing I'll say is I really think, and this is what came out of that meeting, I think how the study is structured and the parameters of the study are very important because as we all know, you can, and we're not saying this is what's happening by any stretch, you can structure a study with an end goal in mind and things can be funneled to that end goal. And that's why I think it's really important that we make sure that inadvertently, this is not something that EDIC doesn't regularly, and this group of folks don't regularly fund feasibility studies. That's not their, the town does. So I think that's why it's valuable to have some town sort of input and part of that conversation on a regular basis. But we can get some feedback and look back into that. Sam?
Just say that, this whole issue of community broadband goes back a long way. And some people would say that the town dropped the ball in several different times over the last dozen years, from the time that Open Cape was actually put in place as a private-public partnership, if you will. And I think this group has taken the initiative to really push it forward, and they've used EDIC as sort of a natural partner to be able to put this feasibility study together to try to give us all some better facts on which to make the decisions as to whether we want to get involved in it as a municipality or whether it's a not-for-profit. So there's options as to how this thing could play out in terms of actually implementing a community broadband. But I want to just say thank you to that group for pushing this forward, and EDIC at least giving us the opportunity to go out and see whether it makes any sense at all to push forward on a project like this at the town in any, really, and being implemented by any number of different organizations.
Okay, thank you. Well said. Good point. Okay, we have minutes. Public session, September 9th, 2019.
Yes, I had a couple of edits I can get to. And I know Jennifer's not here, but, sorry, did you say September 9th?
Yes.
Okay, good. On page 3, at the very top of the page, it refers to Mr. Jones' motion to have the town administrator. I think that should be manager.
Okay.
And then on page 6, and I spoke to Julian about this, but in the second paragraph, in the very middle, it says 2 hawk signals facing each way. That's a phonetic, but that should really be HAWKE, and I think it's capitalized because it's a proprietary, or so it's HAWKE is the nature of is the name of that system, and not HALK. And then going down to the just above the bolded line that says Mr. Jones' motion, it says Elizabeth's, the last name is Saito, S-A-I-T-O is what it should be. Just a couple of, and then I think that was it for corrections. So with that, I would move that we,
I would just, I'm sorry, just add to that,
Oh,
just
sure.
Scott Lindell's name, if we can just spell it correctly on that, right above Elizabeth Saito.
oh, yeah,
L-I.
thank you for catching that.
Yep. Great.
So with those edits, I would move approval and release to the public.
Second?
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you. And we have, the minutes of September 16th are still being finalized. We have some executive minutes of Monday, August 5th.
I move approval and not release.
Can you do that? I
I
think
can't.
that was the one you weren't here, Sam.
I move approval, not
Oh.
release.
Thank you.
Okay? All those in favor? Thank you, I appreciate it. All right, aye. Okay. And we have the September 9th executive session minutes.
I would move approval and not release.
Well, except I think there are some edits that probably
Okay.
need to be.
Okay, so with whatever edits,
Okay,
I think you can share those. I don't want to inadvertently.
With the secretary.
With this, yeah, we
I'm
can share them.
happy to do that because I think it's more a matter of communication and some ambiguity as, in the use of the acronyms. They were never actually defined. And
Okay.
I'm not sure they're used properly.
I'm comfortable with whatever edits Mr. Patterson suggests. He's good.
Okay, well, I pass these on, and be happy to do that.
Okay.
So that was moved to
Yep,
approve
with
and
those
and not
edits.
release?
Yep. Do I have a second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Okay, I believe that is it. Individual selectmen reports,
Oh,
anyone?
wait a minute. There was the issue of the executive committee minutes? Was that,
We've seen executive session minutes.
All right, then we got the email back.
You'd
Oh.
see the email.
Okay,
but I would
Oh.
like to postpone that because I did not have the time to go through that
I didn't either.
It was
huge
a lot.
number
Okay.
of
We'll carry
minutes.
Okay, thank you. Yep. we can
So,
put that
yeah,
in the next
no,
one.
that was my only point, is that
Great, I
there's
think
no
we
way I
share
could.
that with you. Most people share that with you. Thank you.
Okay.
So we'll put that over on individual selectmen reports, anyone?
Yes, I'll just mention a few things. See, this really goes over the last couple of weeks. Did start attending the FinCom review of the upcoming articles, and particularly the items of the capital budget. The fire and rescue ceremony was, I think, really a great occasion for us to recognize the 9/11 event. I attended the Wounded Warriors bike ride, and I know Julian was there at the beginning to send the various bikers off. And I managed to catch him again at Old Dock Road, and I know there were people throughout the community that were there sort of rooting them on and supporting them in that way. It was a great occasion here in Falmouth. I'm glad we have a chance to participate in that process and honoring these warriors in their event. Also attended the Lieutenant Governor Polito's site visit to the Comanasset River restoration. Was quite an appropriate occasion where a lot of people were recognized for their contributions, and it's nice to have somebody at that level of our government, our state administration come and actually look at and see it for themselves. Attended the Stephen Swenson Eagle Court of Honor on your behalf, and then finally I wanted to mention I went to the Cape Cod Regional Transit Authority Advisory Board meeting last week, in which the improvements that have been made to the Hyannis Transportation Center were highlighted. They have rearranged the bus bays to make them actually larger to accommodate the private transporters like Peter Pan and Plymouth and Brockton. And they've put solar panels on all of them now. And they now have gotten to a point where they will be generating more than 90% of the electrical energy that they need to run that facility. Quite a progressive, forward-looking, and I think taking advantage of federal and state grants to actually to do the work. And the other thing they've done for us is put those new trolleys into service here and rerouted the Sea Line just for the summer months to include the hospital. So a lot of neat things have been done to improve the services and actually make them more efficient. So my hat's off to Tom Care and the cooperating operating company MV that operates out of South Dennis.
Great, thank you. Sue?
Just a quick thing, with respect to the Assembly of Delegates, there's a charter review going on. I chaired the recall issue committee, and I just want to invite folks to send me an email if they would like to participate or have any thoughts on that.
Great. I was able to attend some of the events that Sam had previously mentioned, so I won't go over them, but one thing I just want to remind this board is that we need to get our feedback back to water quality. So if folks have any thoughts about the draft that we saw, if we can be prepared to, it'll be on our next agenda, I think on the 7th, to talk about it a bit more. So just for folks to bear that in mind so that we can
Good heads up.
yeah, to do that. And then just a congratulations to Doug Brown, who was married this weekend. So that's why he is not here, although he's weighed in to you know, give input through Mr. Suso on some items here. So he was not shirking his duties, but congratulations to him and to Robin.
Here, here.
And also appreciation to Doug. I know he also was at the Wounded Warriors acting as water boy once again.
Yes, he does.
I was able
Tradition.
to bring Derek down to the Wounded Warriors on the rainy day, and one of the things that the kids did mention is how much appreciation the Wounded Warriors had on a rainy day to have people out there cheering them on. It was a sort of a mutual appreciation back and forth. It was
Yeah,
very nice.
great event. So hopefully they'll get sunshine at some, someday, at some point, they'll get a beautiful day, so. Mr. Suso?
Yes, thank you. Just one item. We're pleased to be proceeding with the replacement of the failing septic system at the West Falmouth Fire Station building and installing a nitrogen removing septic system given the proximity to West Falmouth Harbor. My compliments to Public Works, Water Quality Management Committee, and others for assisting in this process.
Great,
Thank you.
thank you. Mr. Suso?
Move we adjourn.
Second? Somebody?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I thought you were seconding that one.